In the early 2000s, Epic Games was a humble developer that had just seen success after releasing their hit Unreal Tournament games, and had rebranded from Epic Mega Games. While the developer would bat around the idea of a spin-off series revolving around mech combat and character classes, the idea would be shelved as Unreal Tournament evolved multiple times over the span of 5 or so years. By the time Epic decided to look at their prototype again, the gaming industry had shifted to be more single-player focused, with juggernauts like Metal Gear, The Legend of Zelda, and the ever-prominent Resident Evil beginning to really plant their roots as titans of the industry. Resident Evil 4 in particular exuded so much influence that once again a game was born with it as a jumping-off point, and the project at Epic Games pivoted to Gears of War. The idea was to combine the camaraderie showcased in the miniseries Band of Brothers with the horror found in Resident Evil, all while accented and supplemented by a cover system derived from Namco's Kill Switch. Bionic Commando was also cited for its snappy gameplay and movement, Zelda was looked at for its usage of tools and underground level design, and Metal Gear lent its influence to the naming convention of the game. It was truly a great example of taking the best of many different games and combining them to create something new, a hybrid of genres, mechanics, and storytelling all packaged neatly together in a new IP, which is strikingly similar to how another game originated with GOW as its acronym. With the idea penned and the development started, Epic presented their game at the 2005 GDC, their demo wowing the viewers and making the case for Unreal Engine 3's capabilities. In fact, the showcase was so successful that Tim Sweeney decided to take that momentum and sent a screenshot of what Gears of War would look like if it were running on the Xbox 360's initially planned 256 megabytes of memory. The visual downgrade apparently made such an impression that the Epic Games vice president soon received a phone call from Microsoft's CFO claiming that the decision to double the amount of available memory cost the company $1 billion, which I'm sure is hyperbole, but it's still a funny story regarding the development of Gears. With heavy marketing and exclusivity to the Xbox 360 initially, Gears of War eventually released in November of 2006, selling just shy of 6 million copies worldwide in its first 2 years, becoming the first Xbox game to sell out and reach the top 10 charts in Japan, and becoming the second most successful game in Microsoft's roster at the time behind Halo. In a way, the success of Gears of War was directly responsible for Fortnite.
Here, take this!
I was just starting high school when Gears of War dropped, and I wound up picking up the limited collector's edition along with an Xbox 360 at an ancient historical storefront known simply as Toys R Us. It's still probably one of my favorite collector's editions that I own, a black and red relic adorned with the scars of countless drops, clatters, and carelessness of a teenager who lugged his games around to friends' house every weekend. The series was so influential in my life that my then girlfriend at the time and I decided to pop the case off of my original Red Ring of Death simulator and lacquer it up with a sheen of red and black, scarring one side with acetone and attempting to create some kind of homage to something that I loved. I mean, it kind of came out alright, besides the back with the acetone. The second game came and then the third, and just like that the trilogy was wrapped up and there was never another Gears of War game, the end. At least, that's how I viewed the series. Because when the franchise continued to sputter out Judgment and 4 and 5, for some reason I never had an interest in picking it back up. Maybe it was aging and growing out of the testosterone-fueled bro culture that I was heavily ingratiated in throughout high school and college. Maybe I just got busy. But something kept me from continuing on the trail of Gears games, from revisiting a series that I used to adore. So here I am now. In this video, I'll be revisiting the original Gears of War trilogy and analyzing its storytelling, combat, mechanics, and overall design. I'll be playing the Ultimate Edition that released in 2014 for the first game and then console for the other two. I know there's another remaster that'll be out by the time this video drops, but I don't want to wait around for it, so. Before I begin, I want you to personally understand that there will in fact be a fucking War Thunder ad about halfway through this powerhouse of a video. So please, for the love of God, try not to be too alarmed. There's something about that little tune that just, Gears kicks off with a quick rundown of this alternate reality Earth, and what happened when it went to shit. It's a simple premise that works well enough. One day there was a human society, the next there was a gigantic alien-adjacent attack that started from the underground and worked its way through the streets of civilization. The event is known as Emergence Day, or E-Day for short. And that's all there is to it for now. The story is centered around a group of soldiers known as Delta Squad who serve the Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COG for short. I'll throw this one out there now, this game isn't very deep when it comes to its naming conventions or storytelling. I could just see Cliff Bleszinski sitting in a back room somewhere going, "COG, like gears, get it? That's perfect." So yeah, you're gonna get your COGs and your emergence days and all that, but to be fair, I don't think Gears ever tried to be anything more than that. Our main character is Marcus Phoenix, who looks like a mid-2000s frat bro, or Fred Durst, I guess. But he's voiced by John DiMaggio, so I mean...
You could get in a lot of trouble for doing this.
Come on, man, that voice is so fucking good. So Big Marcus here has been jailed for crimes unknown at the moment, and his good buddy Dom busts him out and tells him that he's been pardoned along with everyone else who survived this decrepit prison. The game pulls no punches when it comes to immediately getting the player to start playing, and this whole scene is maybe 30 seconds long. Mechanically, Gears is good, but not great. Your gut instinct is to sprint down the hallway whenever you can, but the sprint button is also your cover button. So every time you try to bust through an empty space, you more often than not stick to some wall or barricade. It makes sense given the gameplay style that the devs were trying to replicate, but it's safe to say that it's not my favorite way to maneuver through a level. Of course, the actual combat and cover system is better than this, though again, not incredible. And I know this is sounding like I'm already going, "Ah shit, well this isn't as good as I remember." But there is one thing that this game excels at, that it put all of its stat points into: audio design. This game's audio is fantastic. The heavy thudding stomps of Marcus as he trudges from point to point, the expletives hurled as your gun jams, the gravelly warbling of the enemy soldiers, the theatrical hum of the soundtrack as Marcus screams and saws a guy in half, all of it really helps to pull you in and make you forget about the just adequate gameplay. In a way, the audio enhances those gameplay elements and kicks them up a level, elevating the overall experience.
Take cover!
Get ready. Here they come!
Nice!
Of course, there are some standout parts about combat that do really help to move things along. Executions and melee kills are gnarly, gory, and just plain fun. The whole process of maiming and pulling apart your enemies is just this angry, erratic, and visceral experience, again mirroring another game with the same acronym. Participating in a squad that quips back and forth at each other is interesting. But the biggest plus for me is the active reload system, which is something that I've pined to see appear in more games for a very long time. Basically, when you go to reload, if you tap it at the perfect moment, not only do you instantly reload, you gain a damage boost. It forces those tense moments to put you that much more on edge when you fail an active reload and wind up jamming your gun for a moment, or manage to pop off the perfect reload and explode an enemy's head before you expire. In a way, it makes combat feel more realistic. The idea that a soldier could fail something so tactile in the midst of a firefight with aliens is, well, very grounded. It's a great system that's second in my opinion only to staged reloading that appears in games like Modern Warfare 2 and Battlefield 4. The process of breaking Marcus out of prison showcases just how fucked everything is. 14 years of war against this subterranean threat effectively leveling anything that remotely resembles civilization in an unforgiving way. Escaping to the Colonel has him recognizing Marcus as a traitor who was put away before later being pardoned, that aspect of his past being kept in the dark for now while the Colonel rattles off the latest plan to stop the big bad creatures known as the Locust Horde once and for all. This is spelled out in the middle of combat while he pulls aside Lieutenant Kim and explains that they intend to map the underground tunnels with a device, use the data to locate the epicenter of their nests, and annihilate the threat with a big bomb. That's a plan 14 years in the making, baby, let's go. So we march to locate Alpha Squad, who have possession of the mapping device and are currently pinned down by hostiles. And this is where the game really starts to spell out its issues. First and foremost, while the combat banter and general dialogue between you and your squad mates tends to be fun and energetic, your team really doesn't do anything compared to you. And that means that while they tend to huddle in the center and suppress the enemy, it's Marcus who's flanking and tossing grenades and taking out reinforcements while the rest of the team have their collective thumbs up their asses. And to further exacerbate this issue, you have to play the way the devs want you to, or you're probably going to die. Here's a good example. There's a courtyard where the enemy pins down the squad with a turret, and you're directed to flank around and get its ass. Cool, but what if I just run up and toss a grenade at the dude? Well, another one pops out and immediately takes his place. Your squad doesn't take advantage of the brief ceasefire to move up, it just sits there and waits for you to flank. So you have to follow the route plotted by the developers or you're probably going to eat shit, making this whole experience more of an on-rails adventure than it already is. The audio design is doing the heavy lifting to make this endeavor pleasing enough, but better mechanics would help to elevate it to become a lot more fulfilling. Eventually your squad does do a little more to help keep locusts off you while you take care of some important issue, but you're always going to be the main character who needs to do the most important thing, because that's just how the game and story are structured. Fortunately, the scenes between the combat really help to smooth over the rough edges, instilling an ample amount of charisma into this entire affair. The Carmine family kicks off its curse, showing the newbie private being killed on the spot as his gun jams. For those not in the know, the member of the Carmine family dies in nearly every Gears game, a running gag that the devs have continued even in the most recent games to my knowledge. As you push onward, you'll find the remains of Alpha Squad's Rojas and witness the death of another soldier named Gules. These are all different flavors of the color red, Carmine being a darker shade of red, Rojas being a derivative of the Spanish word for red, and Gules being a red tincture utilized in medieval heraldry. All three names were chosen as the expansion of the running gag, a nod to Star Trek's red shirt phenomenon that leads the trend of relatively unimportant characters dying. Of course, we can't have a 3-member squad, so Carmine's immediately replaced with everyone's favorite defensive tackle, Coltrane.
Damn! Oh, you can't see straight? Well, let me help you with this.
Yeah, that was beautiful, baby.
State your name, soldier.
Private Augustus Cole, Alpha Squad, sir.
Cole? As in the coal train?
Yeah, that's right.
Number 83. Damn.
The one and only, baby.
Remember this guy? He played for the Cougars, defensive lineman.
I know it's easy to dismiss a lot of this game's writing as going the most frat bro route, but there's actually something endearing to this day about taking someone who used to be a pro football player, or actually they call it thrashball in this universe because fuck it, that sounds edgy, but showing what someone like that might look like as a soldier after the world falls into chaos is pretty damn fun. I'm not gonna mince words here, I was, and still am to a degree, this game's target demographic.
Hey Marcus, remember? Division playoffs, 40-yard line?
I remember you owe me $20.
So let's talk weapons now that we're dick deep in Flavortown. Your bread and butter is the Lancer rifle, an iconic weapon with a chainsaw attachment that defies logic but looks cool enough to supersede any deeper thought. While the actual bullet spray is pretty weak against even the most standard of enemies, it fires enough of them per magazine to make it reliable enough, much like Halo's MA5 default rifle. Following in the footsteps of Halo is the snub pistol, which is exceedingly powerful when landing consecutive headshots much like its M6 Magnum counterpart. The upgrade to this would be the Boltok pistol, a locust weapon that reduces the required headshots to 2. Actually, that one might be closer to the Magnum if I'm gonna be honest. But I love it as nearly as much as I love the Nasher shotgun, which is, well, it's just a shotgun. Not much more explanation required on that front. The Hammer Burst is a locust weapon, with its caveat being that it's a 6-round burst weapon with more accuracy and less coolness. I never really used it much. The Boom Shot, man, these names are on the nose. The Boom Shot makes a boom when shot. It's a grenade launcher. The Torque Bow is a bow that uses torque, but it also fires explosive arrows, which is sick. And the Long Shot Sniper Rifle, holy shit, take a guess at what that one does. That's right, it's a shotgun.
Nice! Back in your hole!
I feel like this section got less analytical as it went on. Well, whatever, moving on. As you make your way back to the remainder of Alpha Squad, you gain access to the Hammer of Dawn, a satellite-based laser targeting weapon that can only be used outside in order to triangulate a position and cause a particle beam from space to rain hellfire down on its target from above, which is pretty fucking sick and looks cool as hell. You use this to take out Cedars, a locust unit that looks particularly spider-like and launches organic mortars into the air that seek out and obliterate most human armor. And since we're here, we might as well talk about what a locust is. The Cedar is actually the exception to how most of the other locust units look, and stands out as a strange beast rather than a mutated-looking human, which is what most of the locust horde appear as. Drones, scouts, and snipers are your run-of-the-mill troops. Boomers are bigger, tankier, and use grenade launchers. And wretches are small, quick, and seemingly underdeveloped compared to the rest of the horde. None of these descriptors do much to explain what these enemies are, whether they're actually alien or derivative of humanity via experimentation, and I honestly can't recall if their origins are ever explained in the first 3 games. Actually, yes I can, I just played the first 3 games, they're never fucking explained fully. But whatever. The more you look at them, witness how they move, communicate, and strategize, the more you naturally question just what these seemingly organized monsters are. And the next string of scenes only continue to raise questions and compound the overall mystery of the locusts. As you link up with Alpha Squad, you're introduced to Baird, the smartass of the group who's intentionally abrasive and consistently fed up with any inconveniences. And once again, the formulaic nature of the game proves to be a detriment to plot enjoyment, as we now have 5 characters in the squad. The new guys Cole and Baird are probably safe. Marcus's best friend Dom is probably safe. That leaves Lieutenant Kim as the odd man out. And as we prep for evac, one of those cedar pods gets launched at our chopper, and a torrent of locusts begin pouring their way out from nearby buildings in an ambush. The following scene shows Kim firing away at various drones as a very large and intimidating locust bears down on him slowly. And you know what's going to happen because the only way that Kim would have been able to leave the squad and still live is if that chopper remained intact. Still, you have to give credit to the writers for including set pieces and introducing new faces that are interesting enough to ignore the obvious outcome. In this case, we witnessed the locust horde prove to be just more than mindless zombie-like creatures, setting a clever tactical trap for the squad here and ensuring that they could cut off an escape before swarming them. This is headed by General Rom, a locust whose very existence implies that there's a social structure and ranks within the horde. He also makes the big burly human soldiers look like action figures with his sheer size, which definitely helps the whole scene along. It's just a great cinematic, one that results in the squad falling back into a nearby building as they attempt to regroup. And this trend of switching off between easily predictable outcomes and fun-to-watch cinematics continues seamlessly from set piece to set piece. For example, when the squad falls back, Marcus takes up the leadership role right then and there. Which makes zero in-universe sense, but makes perfect sense mechanically because he's the main character. Up until a couple of hours ago, Marcus was a traitorous prisoner. Dom was sent by his superiors to bust him out, meaning that he's a high enough rank to be trusted with that task. Meanwhile, Cole and Baird have been around long enough to be entrusted with the retrieval and deployment of the biggest and best shot that humanity has at ending this war. Literally any of these people are better suited to take up the mantle of leadership, but none of them have anything to say when Private Phoenix here decides to radio in the report and begins requesting orders and support. But again, it doesn't really matter, does it? John DiMaggio's our main guy, and we love hearing him in scenes like these. And besides, we don't really have time to think about this because another type of locust is introduced in the same scene, the Berserker, a female-only breed of monstrous proportions. This is definitely one of the best introductions to an enemy type, as this monster is shown being barely restrained by 2 much smaller drones before breaking free and charging like a rocket down the hallways towards us. And this is where the horror elements that the game was supposed to embody really make themselves known. Because let's be honest, before this, the horror components basically consisted of standard gore, explosions of limbs, bodies being cut in two, all of your Resident Evil-ish mainstays. But when you're part of an army of people who are shaped like fat bionicles and wield weapons that would conquer all of medieval Europe with a single rifle, your natural inclination isn't to be scared of much. And that's why the Berserker is the perfect inclusion to help propel the horror element to the forefront of the game.
get out of here. We gotta get fucking out of here, man.
Oh my God. Control, this is Delta. We have a berserker in the vicinity. Please advise.
I mean, seeing these big bulky dudes with heads the size of Easter hams suddenly go quiet before cautiously proceeding is just awesome. And it extends beyond their reactions, because as a player you're still thinking, alright, cool, boss fight where I use a lot of ammo. But then you're told that berserkers are basically immune to all regular firepower, meaning that we have to force the thing outside in order to smoke it with the Hammer of Dawn. Now this whole setup is great, right? The berserker will kill you in a single strike if it runs into you, and you have to lure it through some breakable doors in order to get it to an outside courtyard. It's an intense, nerve-wracking game of cat and mouse that's enhanced by a time limit. However, the execution is terrible, because while the game does have its strengths in how it utilizes the sprint and cover systems, it was not meant for this kind of fine-tuned leading of an enemy AI. First off, if Dom gets ran over, he's basically dead, and if he dies, you have to try again. Now mind you, Dom is kinda just puttering along and not doing anything of import besides meandering into traffic here. But secondly, the berserker has a tendency to just not know how to get through the tight doorways that you're required to lead it through. It's a great idea overall, but it's just an awful experience that should have been retooled to work better with the game's strengths. Getting it outside does at least have you blasting it 3 times with the hammer, which looks cool and makes you feel accomplished. Upon dispatching the monster, Marcus phones back into the colonel, who goes, "Oh shit, you're alive? Well, congrats, Sergeant. Move on out to a nearby facility so that you can get underground and map the tunnels." So yeah, you're the main character, and for as much as the game harps on military code, there really are no rules beyond you getting cool guy points for being a cool guy. You're told that the area is too locked down by the enemy to send in extraction choppers, so we proceed on foot further into the city and into Act 2. Act 2 has the game trying its damnedest to come up with more stuff to do, but none of it is fleshed out enough to make any of it worthwhile. For example, you're told that you can now command your squad to regroup, ceasefire, and attack. But their AI isn't good enough to make any of those commands matter the vast majority of the time. In fact, the few times that I did try to get them to move accordingly, they almost always tell me that they can't get there or they can't do what I'm trying to tell them to do. Another minor example of gimmick mechanics is a car on a bridge. The game directs you to push it for mobile cover, which is a great idea on the surface, but it takes so long to inch it forward and your squad just keeps fighting ahead of you while you do, so it's not worth it when you can just move up and fight like usual. And that's the thing about moments like these, they feel like token inclusions to mix up the usual combat. But the game is mechanically at its best when you're taking out ambushes, witnessing events like collapsing buildings, and fighting your way to the next objective while listening to your squad banter back and forth. It doesn't need to be more, but I understand the sentiment of wanting to make more from it. These moments just, again, weren't executed well enough to warrant their insertion. The interesting moments throughout this endeavor instead stem from another beastly entity known as the Corpser, another spiderish enemy that uses its finger-like tendrils to dig through the ground and collapse various ways forward. All it takes are moments like these to keep things interesting without trying to reinvent the wheel, as the Corpser's implementation is exactly the kind of thing that I want to see. Another moment is when Dom claims that he knows of a guy who can help us out with a vehicle for transportation to our next objective, someone who's part of a group known as the Stranded. Baird reacts to this information with shock and disgust, as if simply associating with the Stranded is taboo. Now here's where the series lore actually picks up in a more interesting direction, and is fleshed out in later games and associated media like novels and comics. The long and short of the Stranded is that they choose to live outside of the COG's jurisdiction, a choice made due to their disdain with how they treated humanity during the war against the Locust Horde. With many of the planet's cities under attack directly and human technology falling into the hands of the Locust, the appointed leader of the world initiated a protocol that not only torched many cities with targeted Hammer of Dawn strikes, but also locked down the planet's citizens, forcibly conscripting the men into the military and the women into breeding farms. The Stranded obviously stand against this, living on the fringe of the COG-controlled territories and attempting to survive on their own. They see the COG as a fascist regime that sacrificed them to the Locust in order to get a lid on this invasion, and while some cooperate with various soldiers for food and aid, a lot are still openly hostile towards any and all military members. Mechanically, I'd say that the only real addition to this part of the game is another moment where you can choose which path you want to take, separating your squad into 2 groups of 2. This is something that happened in the previous act and does help to lend a little bit of replayability to the overall pretty short game, but it's not a huge deal. It's probably 5-minute stints of doing this. Wandering into the nearby stranded settlement has Dom calling in a favor that's owed to him by one of the leadership here, who begrudgingly gives us the keys to what Dom refers to as a junker. Of course, we gotta go get it, which has Cole and Baird staying behind as collateral. This introduces another horror element, a rabid carnivorous entity known as the Krill. While they sound like bats, their sheer numbers tend to overwhelm and strip any organic entity down to the bone in the blink of an eye, something that's demonstrated multiple times when watching drones cross through the darkness and a couple of survivors suffering the same demise when their light goes out. With the Krill being extraordinarily photosensitive, the only thing needed to keep them at bay is a light source, be it fire from exploded propane canisters or electrical lamp fixtures. While this isn't the most difficult task to pick out the potential source of light and dash between it and another one, it does do exactly what instances like the Berserker fight and the car push failed to do, creating a source of tension while meshing perfectly with the established gameplay in a way that feels organic and well-rounded in execution. It's also worth noting how well the environments have been crafted in this game so far. You could describe them in the vaguest possible terms and define them that way, sure. A memorial garden, a prison, a city, but they're surprisingly good at helping to immerse the player in what this world looked like before and after the E-Day attacks, with little details everywhere that showcase how society was and is now. The city in particular has your big showpieces like the makeshift raft for crossing the river, but it also has a lot of little touches like the lantern lights strung up around various parts of the city, indicative of a festival that may have been going on before the attacks, or little bedroll areas that harbor the faint glow of a TV, someone's living space in this cruel and unforgiving world. After a few more hurdles involving the likes of a much faster to push car and a spotlight section where you help Dom to turn on the power to some lights, you make it to a drunken stranded guy, who we depend on to make it through a building as he powers different parts of it in order to get us through it. It's a great idea in the mission that puts these tough and fearsome soldiers' lives in the hands of someone who's wholly untrustworthy, further enhancing the tension and horror elements of an otherwise action-oriented game.
Lights still on? Uh-oh. Just playing with you.
However, once again the issue lies with your AI buddy trying to squeeze through the tighter hallways when half of them hurt him. And I think the devs had to have realized this shortcoming because this entire section lasts about 3 minutes and has Dom teleporting to me when he goes down because he can't path properly. That last bit might have been a bug, but I'm grateful that I didn't have to go attempt to rescue him from the dark during this segment. You eventually make it to the Junker, a futuristic hunk of metal that you and the fellas can use to make it to your next objective at last. Before that though, you have your obligatory vehicle section, which has you switching between piloting the vehicle or using the UV turret to blast the Krill away. It's not great. I mean, it's not terrible gameplay, but the game breaks its own rules for the Krill, which now just sweep through the well-lit areas to attack you for no discernible reason, something that I'm just not a fan of due to how it wholesale disregards the convention that this game taught you for the majority of Act 2. The finale is a big wave defense kind of ordeal where you take out locust after locust back at the stranded camp. It's okay enough, I always have a good time popping the heads off of enemies, and this is a fun enough shooting gallery to fulfill that desire. When it's all said and done, you drive off to a mining facility that will hopefully get you underground, and Act 3 officially begins. The group splits once again for reasons unknown, making the majority of this game now feel more about being in a squad of 2. I guess the reasoning here is that it'll be easier to find an alternative entrance to the shut-off facility, but it's not like either squad directs the others to fall in once they find their respective entrances. It gets hard to ignore these logistics inconsistencies sometimes, but here we are, I guess. So the theme for this act is that the wretches here have become lambent after huffing the emulsion fumes from the underground tracts of land containing it. I will not be explaining further. Nah, I'm kidding. Emulsion is the fictional fuel source that Sarens... this version of Earth is called Sarah. I feel like I'm getting worse at explaining things. Anyways, Sarens found a fuel source made of a parasitic mushroom that glows gold and is so powerful that it had the potential to reduce any need for energy to a non-existent level. It's turbo petrol. And it's also extremely volatile, meaning that wretches affected by it explode when killed. Which is a fun way to create explosive enemies without them strapping dynamite to their chests. After wading through a very stupid section where the ground explodes out from under your neutron star mass and you have to run away from the endless supply of lambent wretches, you eventually make it through tight corridor after tight corridor, something that again, this game does not excel at. So the devs decided to take away your ability to move and shove you into a minecart, which has always been a very strange part of this game. Like they were required to come up with a gimmick for every level. The krill part was thematic and made sense, the minecart, not so much. You wind up shockingly splitting off from two of your guys again, though at this point I gotta say that this must have been to make the co-op experience as interesting as possible. But it starts to get unintentionally funny as the game progresses and Epic starts scrambling to come up with ways to separate you from the pack.
Watch out!
Okay, we're running out of time. We gotta split up and find that station.
I hope I got the right path here.
Hey, I hope we both do.
I don't think we needed to split up for this. So yeah, Act 3 is probably the weakest act in the game, though it does do the environmental stuff pretty well. When you eventually get to the glowing emulsion pits, the contrast between the dark, moody caves and the bright, bubbling liquid is a sight to behold. You eventually fight a corpser at last, which is a terribly easy fight and has you shooting at soft points until it backs onto a platform and then you can just launch it into the emulsion. At this stage in Gears' lore development, there wasn't really an ironclad definition of what this goop was, how it works, and so on. The definition that I gave you earlier comes from the later games, so I figured I'd just kind of establish it now. And simply dunking the corpser into the stuff kills it, either via burning, drowning, or rapid and fatal poisoning akin to radiation. But in later games, there's a whole sect of locusts which are fine bathing in the emulsion, making the death of this corpser seem like a retcon. Well, fine is very relative, but you know what I mean. They survive, they adapt, they overcome. I guess to justify this though, it's a big spider that can't swim in lava, and the rapid overexposure to the emulsion overwhelmed it rather than mutating it slowly over time. I don't know. It doesn't make sense with later knowledge, but we'll get to that. Getting to our target at last has us encountering the tougher version of the drones called Theron guards. This is our final hurdle in the act, which isn't particularly tough. The boys plant the payload, head back to the surface, and run like hell as the mapping device explodes with energy so powerful that it had to have collapsed the tunnels that we set to chart out. Of course, it didn't. In fact, the opposite issue occurs as the kernel tells you that the mapping was so minimal in effect that we'd need hundreds of these devices to effectively plot out the entirety of the underground cave network. Oh no, whatever will we do?
We need 100 resonators to map these tunnels.
So what? We'll use this instead.
Ah, yes, the old "I found this thing we need on the way out" technique. A classic plot device when you have no idea how to tell a story. Alright, yeah, we might as well get this one out of the way now. Gears of War excels at coming up with really hype ideas and implementing them kind of successfully. Most of the bigger moments are included under the guise of "wouldn't this be cool?" without a lot of extra detail worked in. So you'll get stuff like a boomer who uses a single shot grenade launcher, but for some reason he cocks it like a shotgun when he goes to shoot it. Or you'll have this mapping device emit a wave of energy so powerful that it knocks these guys off of their feet despite being hundreds of meters above it now. Or the krill will suddenly not care about light so that you can use the UV turrets against them. Or the guy who was locked up in prison for being a traitor will be chosen as sergeant in his very first mission. So yes, the concept of locusts are cool, the beasts of war that they use are cool, the setting of the world is cool, the general story is cool. But the actual plotline is one of convenience, of relying on a sudden revelation, a discovery, or happenstance to drive the narrative forward without putting too much extra work into making these moments make sense. It's still a fun game to play, but it isn't exactly nourishment for the brain, if that makes any sense. It's closer to junk food for the brain. Now say something cool, Marcus.
What do you mean it didn't work?
Anyways, that map data that Baird found is traced back to the source, which happens to be Marcus's dad's house.
That's right! Fuck yeah!
And of course, General Rom happens to have captured Mystery Soldier number 1, who was meandering around the mines, I guess, and managed to get caught while not alerting the rest of the military to his location, capture, and so on. Like, you have this lady who Marcus keeps radioing and asking to do certain things, like figure out the best route forward. Give me a sit rep on the rest of the squad's exact location, shit like that. And she apparently never realizes that there's a lone gear hanging out in Glowville. Anyways, Big Boy Rom listens in on this new information before crushing the only method that he had of spying on the enemy and killing the soldier.
That's right! Fuck yeah!
Act 4 begins back in the city, an exciting scene with Delta Squad flying in on a chopper unfolding as the boys need to make an emergency landing before trudging onward towards Marcus's dad's house. This is the act where the devs went, fuck it, let's stick to our strengths, and stopped worrying about coming up with gimmicks for the player to hurdle. It's basically just non-stop fighting and set pieces through the streets of the city, complete with another berserker fight and turrets galore. And of course, there are always reasons to split up. I would say that this is my favorite act just due to the setting and choreography of these fights. Everything has this kind of ruined historical vibe to it, and that sensation only increases the closer that you get to Daddy's house. I will say that the berserker fight is as flawed as the last one and kind of looks like this. Getting to the house in question reveals it to be a gigantic, sprawling estate, complete with statues, busts, pillars, tapestries, and so on. It's an incredible sight to behold, but it's also simultaneously jarring because nobody comments on it. Baird doesn't snarkily remark about Marcus being rich, Cole doesn't claim that he had something similar with his pro-athlete money. Marcus doesn't even mention anything about returning to his dad's mansion, if he was even around when he acquired it. They just stomp through the place and take out locusts as they pop up to intercept him. It's really fucking strange, like the devs forgot to think about how these people might react to new information about the group's leader. And I know what you're thinking. Probably. Or not, whatever. Surely they'll bring this up after the firefight, right? Nope. They just go in, grab the rest of the mapping data from the estate's backrooms, and bust out of there in an APC. It's a bizarre way to introduce potential lore and then just wholesale ignore any sort of expansion on it, especially when it's something so obviously interesting to the player. But hey, we're not here to think. Say something cool, Coltrane.
Yeah, whoa! Bring it on, baby!
That's not good enough. Throw in a 40k Forge Fiend.
Go!
Hell yeah, now we're not thinking good. The final act begins with the boys being stopped by a bridge that's been foisted upright and an ambush by the horde that follows soon after. Baird notices this by now because, well, they've been ambushing Delta Squad at every turn since leaving the mines. Doesn't take a rocket surgeon to figure this one out. But more interesting is the fact that for all my bitching, the writers did eventually think to at least have Dom and Marcus chat about Marcus's dad after they split off from the group again.
Man, you sounded just like your old man back there.
Yeah, well, screw my old man. He thought he could prevent this war, and look what happened.
Yeah, well, now his mapping data is gonna help end it.
Somehow. I don't think he'd appreciate the irony.
It's not exactly what I had hoped for considering the incredible setting of the estate that was just ignored, but it is something that raises more intrigue surrounding what exactly happened with Papa. I guess the compromise here would have been to have a small scene where they're riding along in the APC and one of the boys brings up the Phoenix family's apparent wealth. Act 5 continues the trend of the previous one, upping the stakes and creating some awesome fights and fun moments. In fact, I think I might like it as much as Act 4, truth be told. It's a very strong finish to this game, and revolves around battle after battle in various urban locales while you try to restore power to the bridge so that you can catch a speeding train containing the light mass bomb that will hopefully destroy the Locust once and for all. Again, there isn't a ton of thought put behind this plot point. It's more of a, hey, what cool shit can we do here? Train? Train cool, yes. Put bomb on train like Wild West movie, haha.
Wait, the bomb is on a train?
Like, there isn't even a point to it being on a train right now, considering that the map data of the tunnels was so exceedingly large that we have it on a local storage unit until we can physically get it to a military installment. But apparently the COG was like, well, we have the data coming eventually, ship that fucker out on a train, stat. And the explanation for this event is that Command identified a big-ass sinkhole and went, well shit, that's gotta be the main nest, right? And now intend to send the bomb at that hole in the hope that Delta Squad can make it to the train in time to upload the mapping data.
The train's going to deliver the bomb. Your targeting data will do the rest.
What do you mean it does the rest? It's a fucking bomb. What rest is there to do? You're deploying it in one location. What's a map gonna... Why am I thinking this hard about this? Say something cool, Phil Spencer.
Gaming.
So the Forge Fiend rears its ugly head again. I mean, it's called a Brumach, but come on. And it kind of just stomps around like a dinosaur and chases one of two groups at any given time. There's a point where it charges you and you have to kneecap it while the little robot works on the power lines, but it's more of an interactive cutscene than a challenge. I will say that when the designers finally started getting away from the more out there gimmicks and stuck to their strengths, they did a pretty good job at making this whole endeavor feel like a shit show that Marcus and the crew need to navigate bit by bit. Like, every little issue leads into another issue, but it's eventually all solved and figured out. Usually with bullets. I don't know, it's kind of charming in a way.
That doesn't sound good. Think we can still make it in time?
If we don't, we're gonna spend the rest of our lives running from shit like this.
So yeah, at this point the comms lady is like, oh no, the Locusts are... they're on the trick. We're being overwhelmed.
Say again, Control, you're breaking up.
Impossible to know what she's saying, probably requesting a pizza if I were to guess. So the cycle of problems arising and needing to be solved continues as Marcus decides that since we can't contact the comms lady, we should probably kill the cedar that's blocking communications. Once we do, he radios back over to her and she's like, holy shit, thank God! The Locusts have boarded the train and are throwing our soldiers onto the tracks. Which, I don't know why, but that's such a funny image to me. Like, these things are somehow jumping onto a speeding train, finding the soldiers, and instead of shooting them, they're throwing their bodies onto the train tracks. How did they get aboard? Do they have vehicles? Why don't they destroy the train tracks by burrowing? A train is probably the worst goddamn mode of transportation against these creatures.
This just goes from bad to worse.
This really sucks. Control, we're at Timgad Central Energy.
Copy that. What's your status?
Just moving in now. Wish us luck.
Wow, never mind. This game's cool as hell and I don't care about logic again. I will say that the first Gears of War does something for its entirety that I never mentioned but has continued to bother me throughout. Basically, there's no transitory scenes between gameplay and cutscene that shows the squad moving to a part of a map before playing out the next bit of dialogue or happening. So you'll kind of just shoot the last guy in a wave of enemies and it'll just cut to the next scene before dropping you in the middle of the next battle. And it makes things feel heavily disjointed, like the game is obviously just designed to be a stage into a scene into a stage. It might as well say level 5-3 when it loads you back in, because that's kind of how this feels.
Open the back door for us.
I swear to God, this game is doing this shit intentionally at this stage. That's like the second time ever that this kind of transition has happened. Our goal now is to connect one transformer to another by getting the Brumach to chase us into the electrical current so that we can use its body as a conductor. I'm not sure if that would work. We haven't invented dinosaurs yet, so I can't test it. Now mind you, we were told that this train has been chugging along full speed about, 45 minutes ago, and it was hijacked about 20 minutes ago. We're still trying to lower a bridge. I don't think this is gonna work out. Of course, as always, the convenience for the plot saves the day. Because we fight this thing, lure it to the Transformers, it happens to, I don't know, bite the right cable, and I guess that fixes the bridge? And then the comms lady goes, "Oh hey, so the train is gonna be passing through the station that you're right next to in the same city that you've been in." Well, that's fucking convenient. Why didn't we just take a raft across the river for the past hour?
And I thought the food in prison smelled bad.
Bazinga!
Not in my mouth!
Nah, but boarding the train and running from the caboose to the... what's the front of the train called? The locomotive. Yeah. Anyways, the bomb's at the front for some reason, so that makes this part a long fight through train car after train car, and it's kinda perfect for the constraints of this game. It's like one of the only times where it honestly felt like the developers learned slowly but surely over the course of the game to work towards their strengths, and it all comes together at the very end to create an awesome level of linear action. You've got your regular enemies, ones that fly alongside the train car, a berserker that can be dispatched by disconnecting the train cars. You've got a classic turret section that I'm sick of as a modern gamer but was probably amazing in 2006. You've got the lambent wretches attempting to stop the train and you need to charge ahead to stop them. It's just tense, non-stop action that gives you something to do at all times while also being the best example of Gears of War's linear cover combat system. The final battle is against General Rom, who we've seen about 2 times before this. Now, I'm not saying that it should have been anyone else, but I mean, he killed a guy, killed another guy, and then here he is on the train. I guess I'm not super invested in seeing him dead beyond the fact that he's a locust. Maybe if I got to bond with Kim a bit before he got gutted, or something along those lines. But regardless, he has this whole "for the Queen" thing going on. Something that I never mentioned because it really only came up one time before this, and it's not a plot point that's expanded on until later games. It's crazy how these guys basically went, "Yeah, this game's gotta do well, let's just spread it out over the course of a trilogy." I mean, they were right, but all Gears of War 1 does as a standalone entry is come up with idea after idea after idea without answering any questions or expanding further. Where did the Locust come from? How did they get here? How do their ranks work? What's up with the Queen? What's up with Marcus's dad? What did Marcus do to wind up in prison? You're not getting any of these answers, making this whole game's story feel decidedly unfulfilling. And as we'll eventually see throughout this video, I don't think the devs even knew what kind of answers they wanted to go for. They kinda just went along and made shit up. Either way, the ROM fight is fucking difficult. Maybe it's my playstyle, maybe I just suck, but I die a lot here despite being on normal difficulty. And I'm actually not complaining because it does feel like an accomplishment when he finally goes down. Though I will say that the tactic that I deployed doesn't look particularly, exciting. I wouldn't say it's a great fight, but I would say that it's fine for a finale, especially for a 2006 game. When he eventually goes down, Dom jumps on the nearby chopper, which, for the love of Christ, if we could fly in on a chopper this entire time, why didn't we just do that? Whatever. Marcus inserts the data and then makes an epic leap from the train to the chopper. The Lightmass bomb sends its payload, presumably killing off the heart of the Horde and leaving Marcus dangling in his best friend's grasp. The Colonel looks at John Gears of War and gives him the nod before deciding that he's done enough to warrant him actually not letting him just fucking perish right then and there. And then the game ends after a one-liner or two.
So, what are we doing tomorrow?
I will say that they either scooped Dom's voice actor off of the street, gave him no direction, or paid him in used socks because it really feels like he just phoned it in for this entire game. Like, I think they got one take of him yelling, "Marcus!" because it always sounds the exact same.
Marcus!
Let's go, let's go!
Marcus!
And I would say that it takes me out of these end scenes, but I don't know if I was ever really here to begin with. Anyways, that's that. There's no aftermath shot of the cog rebuilding or a scene with the boys hanging out or anything along those lines. There is more setup as the human-faced Queen of the Locusts sits on her big fly and goes, "Ha ha ha, these idiots don't even know why we fight, and they never will until the next game, ha 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 ha." So yeah, another question in a sea of questions. I would say that Gears of War was a substantial game for its time. It's worth playing for the story today if you plan on hitting the next 2 games right afterwards, but as a standalone story, it's just not fulfilling enough to warrant the playtime. It is worth it for a fun little co-op adventure. There are lots and lots of fun moments, cool locations, and plenty of action. The audio design, as mentioned before, is impeccable. But I would stray from buying the newest remaster personally. I've seen reports of people stating that the Ultimate Edition runs like ass on PC, but I didn't have any issues on my end. Still, this entire game took me about 5.5 hours to beat on normal, including moments where I hunted around for the optional cog tag pickups. I think it would probably take me 12 to 20 hours at most to nab all of the single-player achievements. It's just not worth $40 to me in the slightest. I would say that the game is slightly less good than I remember, but it's still good enough for some mindless fun in a single afternoon of play. I'll level with you now, this video was going to just be about the first game, but the story elements were so unsatisfying that my conclusion was kinda just terrible. So I asked my patrons and they mostly agreed, democracy prevails, and so on and so forth. But before I move on to the second game, let's talk about my sponsor, War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. So War Thunder is an interactive video game that does involve war, but I have yet to see any thunder. And that might have something to do with thunder being a sound, but I'll forgive the devs on this just because the game is free to play on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. And I know what you're thinking, but what about intricately designed individual vehicle components? We want intricately designed individual vehicle components. I know, that's what we all want. I mean, personally, that's my favorite feature in a video game about wartime vehicles blowing each other apart. And thankfully, War Thunder is just chock full of intricately designed individual vehicle components to such an astonishing degree that you might just look at the over 2,500 tanks, planes, ships, and helicopters and go, wow, this truly does look like this game has 3 distinct game modes that ramp up realism progressively, such as arcade for fast-paced matchmaking, simulator mode for all of your simulation desires, and realistic mode that strikes a balance between those last 2 modes. I know, I'm a mind reader. But I think you're missing out on the fact that War Thunder features intense combat complete with X-ray view. Finally, a game for fans of the X-ray, which is of course accentuated with information such as shell penetration location, component damage details, and ultimately what led to the destruction of the vehicle. Here's a hint. It was a fucking armor-piercing high-explosive round from a tank that you just activated by left-clicking. If all of this rip-roaring action really gets your blood pumping, then feel free to use my link in the pinned comment or video description to join the worldwide community of over 95 million players, and download War Thunder today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile devices. New and returning players on PC and console who haven't played in 6 months will receive a load of bonuses like multiple premium vehicles, 7 days of premium account time, 100,000 silver lions, and more. Thanks, guys. So let's give my Xbox Series the workout of its lifetime and move over to Gears of War 2. So Gears 2 immediately rectifies many of its issues by focusing on story much more than its predecessor. Yes, it's not hammering you over the head with lore, but it's definitely at least beginning to unravel more of the mystery instead of just dropping Marcus into combat and telling him to do shit. In this case, we get an introduction where the Queen goes, "We lived, bitch," and shows how despite the bomb going off, the Locust Horde marched on stronger than ever, now pinning humanity to one major city across the entire globe. Marcus is still a sergeant despite setting off the best offensive humanity has launched at this stage, which I always found weird. Dude got promoted from private to sergeant for simply being alive and then got hit with 0 advancement for the year afterwards. The game kicks off with some optional training where Marcus walks the newest iteration of Carmine through the basics, which I desperately need because I was playing with my beloved mouse and keyboard before this and now I have to relearn to aim with a controller. Spoiler alert, I do not learn how to aim with a controller despite playing 2 whole games with it. Your collectibles this time around showcase the emphasis on story, as you go from collecting random dog tags to gaining snippets of world-building information from newspaper clippings to statue inscriptions to random message scraps. While I won't be collecting all of them, the first one does claim that the light mass bomb destroyed all of the krill nests at the very least, meaning that we will no longer be seeing them pop up in the series from here on out. Well, I think some form of them were unsurprisingly brought back for nostalgia purposes in Gears 5, but I'm thankfully not talking about that one today. After training, the hospital that we're at gets attacked, and we meet our newest squad member, Ty, a large meatloaf of a man who exudes aura without saying much. And this is when you get Unchained to go killing once again. Everything is improved, and I mean everything. Your comrades actually take care of and kill off enemies without your assistance a lot of the time. Weapons and their capabilities are explained as soon as you first pick them up. The cover system doesn't feel nearly as clunky, with Marcus grabbing various chunks and slabs of potential cover and repurposing it to actually work as a barricade. Downed enemies can be picked up and used as meat shields. Drones will notice their comrades being downed and run over to pick them up if you're too slow. Locusts react viscerally to being shot in the torso, leg, arms, whatever. Combat primarily takes place in much more open spaces, not the tight corridors that crippled the first game's battles. Everything else feels much more refined in every conceivable way, with the devs learning from their weaknesses in ways that seem unheard of in today's AAA landscape. In many ways, Gears of War 2 makes the first game feel like a simple proof of concept. Like, I cannot stress how much this game feels like an upgrade. I just wish I knew how to aim with a controller. After securing the area, the motifs of the story are spelled out in a series of 6 or so minute back-to-back cutscenes. Dom is now front and center as a character, for better or for worse. Because unfortunately, I just can't get behind his voice acting a lot of the time. Basically, he's been looking for his wife since the first game. It was mentioned a few times with minimal reaction from him, making it very difficult to get behind this idea that it's something that he cares about. But now that search is front and center, as the comms lady imparts information on his wife's potential whereabouts without much more besides a vague idea as to where she could be.
Damn it! Not again! I lost her again! Ah! God damn it!
And I just don't feel like the actor is always into the role, though I again wonder if other factors are at play. For one, the dialogue might just be shit. I mean, the whole "I've lost her again" line hardly feels like the most realistic thing to say. Secondly, it might just be harder to take him seriously when he's never reacted this way in the first game. And finally, you never know what the voice directors might have told the actor to run with. But to me, this entire stint feels forced, especially when it's right at the start of the game like this. The following scene is much better and shows the leader of the planet rallying the COG soldiers for one last offensive. The survivors of this hell have been backed into a corner, and the Locusts returning seemingly stronger than ever after the light mass bomb only reinforces the idea that it's do or die. This is a fantastic series of scenes that showcases humanity's best efforts and military might as they march into the heart of the Horde for one final assault. The music has ramped up to be a fantastic addition to the game and has strayed from sounding very Star Wars-ish, which arguably made it the weakest part of Gears of War 1's audio.
This is the day we take the battle to the heart of the enemy. This is the day that we correct the course of human history. This is the day we ensure our survival as a species.
But all of this does more than just come up with an aesthetic set of scenes before you're dropped off in a cave somewhere, as it strives to incorporate these types of set pieces into the gameplay. The gimmicks from the first game are stripped away to focus on creating the best and most interesting form of cover shooting that can be whipped up while still revolving around the scenario at hand. In this case, we take these big-ass crawlers into battle and are ambushed by the Horde as they send in flying tentacled reavers, assault vehicles on foot by boarding them with grappling hooks, and even bring a Brumach into the fray in order to stop this onslaught from happening. It no longer feels like a game where you're the last 4 humans on the planet taking on wave after wave of monster. You're now surrounded by other gears, by new and old comrades, by air support, even by former stranded. Because after the Locust attacks intensified, the government launched an operation promising to feed stranded families if they sent their men to help out, resulting in soldiers like Dizzy who seem like trucker rednecks compared to the more clean-cut gears. It takes all of the setup, all of the seemingly random pieces of lore tossed out willy-nilly in the first game and starts building things out of it. Maybe I'm just easily impressed. But after sitting through an entire game with no payoff, Gears of War 2 really brings the ruckus immediately, which is exactly what this series needed. After getting slapped by encounter after encounter, Brumok after boarders, after hijackers, after corpser, after another Brumok, you finally earn the right to settle down in a nice hostile town that marks the beginning of our offensive. Ty joins us because he's as hard to kill as he looks, and we march on this small town in the hopes of drilling down at its center. We're met by our first new enemy, the Ticker, which is basically just a small locust with dynamite strapped to it. So, I mean, kind of a miss on that one, considering that I was praising the whole lambent wretch thing before. But whatever. We trudge through a few layers of these, followed by a hilariously bad artificially dark tunnel system. They just didn't know how to fuck with the lighting to make it realistic, so they kind of put a filter of darkness through this whole thing, and it just abruptly ends when you get to the other side. Throughout this entire endeavor, you're constantly communicating with other squads and command in order to keep track of what's going on and to request support when need be, further making this experience feel like you're just one part in a machine. I'd make a cog or a gear joke, but I felt stupid when I started to type it. I don't know why that sensation is holding me back now when I've made it this far already, but whatever. The finale of Act 1 has you playing through a mortar section which, let's be honest, is much superior to the turret section. It's a simple weapon that does what it says on the tin, but something about launching a line of rockets that turn your enemies into red mist is still satisfying to me. The final scene of the act shows exactly what these guys did all of this for, as the rigs come equipped with tunneling drop pods meant for gears to dig down to the heart of the locust nests. Much like the first game's story beats, some kind of elite locust pops out of the woodwork to wreak havoc on the crew just before their descent. No one seemingly dies this time, though Ty and Dizzy do stay back to hold it off while Marcus and Dom are stuck in the pod's safety measures. If Ty were to die here, it would have been just as anticlimactic as Kim dying in the first game, but his calm and collected nature paired with the amount of interaction that we've had with him up until this point would have had me a tiny bit more distraught than Kim's death. But the nature of not knowing whether he made it or not sets up a much better story beat later for when we find him either dead, mangled, or alive and intact. So here we are again, separated, minimal communications, in a cave. And you could say that this is kinda just what the first game did, and you would be right at this moment. But the key difference is the devs taking the time to show you what humanity has to offer, to show their leadership and their numbers, to show how they communicate and organize. The first game showed a hint of that, and then went, oh shit, here comes the enemy, get out there important squad. And it was pretty much all separation from then on, even when Act 4 kicks off and the squad is reunited with command. So Marcus goes through the same motions of trying to re-establish contact with command and other squads in the second game, but it feels much closer to losing a limb rather than everything going back to the default state of Delta Squad. The pacing is much better, and the issue of hardly ever getting one of those transitory scenes showing Delta moving from level to level has been patched up to include segments that highlight the movements of Marcus and the boys. Of course, you aren't just lone wolfing it from here on out. It's not like every drop pod launcher got destroyed on the surface, and soon you're met with the sight of more of these pods chipping through the earth to drop off reinforcements. My favorite part about this beyond the looks is that they aren't just specifically Ty and Dizzy or Cole and Baird, they're just random cog gears dropping in and resuming their role in this strike against the Locusts. It lends much more to the sensation of being a part of a cohesive military unit and not just happening to be the only effective group of soldiers in the field. Delving into the Locust hives isn't just some walk in the park where you're at the start of the game and you run into one or two waves of enemies as you move from room to room. It instead feels like the cavernous hell that you would expect, with non-stop waves of drones, reavers, and boomers. It feels like an actual assault on the enemy stronghold, an unforgiving PTSD-laden round of combat and chaos.
Let's get in there, Dom!
Enemy reinforcements!
And like I said, this is the start of the game, not the final chapter, and it works as well as it does because you're surrounded by allies that can snipe and shoot and throw grenades and lift you up when you go down. You're no longer the main character with plot armor, you're another soldier who's lucky and skilled enough to scrape by. This is the game I remember being as good as it is, at least so far. Of course, right after this, you begin splitting off from the other two in your group of 3, as you eventually settle in with Dom and Carmine. This makes things once again more about being an army of one, but it feels less gimmicky and more essential after the display of team tactics before this. Speaking of gimmicks, we've moved away from pushing cars, evading bats, finding daylight to use a laser, and riding minecarts, instead sticking to things that shake up the combat while keeping it firmly rooted in being a cover shooter. In this case, we have rockworms, which are nearly invincible and can be lured in with fruit in order to take advantage of their carapace as a shield from enemy fire. That's a pretty cool idea. Moving further in has this series at last answering some questions that are desperately needed for story retention. The further you make it in, the more is solved slowly but surely. They have building structures made of intricately carved rock. They do have ranks, with drones now occasionally being accompanied by members of the Cantus priesthood, which are taller and lankier with the capability of screaming and chanting in order to call in reinforcements and heal drones from afar. They have their own language, something that Baird works at deciphering throughout this cavern via scattered messages. And they seem to either pray to or rely on gigantic dune-like worms that seem to be the primary creators of these tunnel systems.
It's a giant worm! They're sinking cities with a giant worm!
It's vastly needed lore that the first game could have used. Although part of me does have to admit that getting these answers in this game has me seeing the first Gears of War in a new light. I know it sounds silly, but by today's standards, all of these games could have fit into one 20 to 25 hour experience with no issue. But this wasn't really the case back in the heyday of Gears. And while the second and third entries have a better chance of standing on their own, they would still be incomplete without the first game to lend some kind of roots for the story to set everything up before lore like this comes in to flesh it out. I'm not saying that the second entry would be bad if the first game didn't exist. In fact, I would accept the argument that Gears of War 2 could have been the first game in the series and everything would have been fine. But it would be less satisfying without the context from Gears of War 1. The sinking of one of the human cities is honestly one of the most creative ways I've seen to transition a level without straight up extracting out and moving to a new location. It goes from being in a deep underground pit to being surrounded by collapsing buildings, husks of vehicles, and remnants of human civilization. And of course, the game never lets off the gas. There aren't a lot of moments of reprieve where you walk around and have some chats about the current situation. Instead, you're facing an onslaught of drones, reavers, and now these rider enemies called blood mounts. Your goal doesn't seem to be to retrieve and set off some kind of crazy weapon, it seems to be to survive long enough to rescue others and regroup before deciding what comes next, making this whole endeavor feel decidedly desperate rather than a show of force from humanity. Eventually you meet back up with Cole, who, regroups with Delta.
Nobody plays this game like me! Nobody!
Cole!
In the flesh, baby!
Control, this is Delta. Cancel Mayday. We've regrouped with Cole. Baird and Sigma are MIA. We're assisting on the search.
Regroup? Is that what you call it when I saved your ass?
Copy that, Delta.
Regroup. That's a good one. Good thing you got your star player back, Delta.
And shortly after this we find Baird, who's been sealed away inside of some kind of sarcophagus for processing by the Locusts, meaning that they're now actively taking prisoners for some sinister reason or another. Now, unfortunately for one of Delta, we now have 5 people, and you know what that means. It means we have a 5-man squad now. Huh, didn't expect that. Though, to be fair, we've had 3 members for the majority of the game so far. Gears 2 continues to not pull any punches as the next big set piece involves you hopping aboard something that looks like a monstrous blimp known as a beast barge. We encounter another new enemy here, the brother of the boomer known as the Grinder. Well, the first one we encounter isn't exactly impressive because I destroyed him before he got a chance to shoot, but they're typically big walking meat shields that wield a detached turret while yelling, "Grind!" And I have to respect just how good these guys got at creating enemies that had this coolness factor to them. They may have not been as iconic as Halo Elites or Hunters, but they did have this horror element laced into their designs that makes them much more fun to encounter. We finally find Ty aboard one of these barges, bloodied, scarred, eyes that went from those of a strong and zen warrior to someone who's witnessed 1,000 hells. Maybe it was due to who Ty was. Maybe Marcus just can't relate and thinks that Ty only wants to keep fighting. Maybe Marcus is just doing the only thing he knows how to do. Regardless of the answer, Marcus hands Ty his own demise in the form of a shotgun. And this is how you make the player care about a tertiary character dying. He didn't talk that much, we weren't always around him, but he was tough. That was his first and most defining trait. It's not only what you were told, it's what he displayed over and over in nearly every single scene that he got. And yet, despite that toughness, he was broken by the Locusts, a true display of evil that has evolved beyond mindless destruction.
I can't believe they did that to Ty. He survives everything, doesn't he?
After retrieving who we can, we radio in a chopper, resulting in a rooftop shootout before the giant worm rears its ugly head and swallows the group whole. We get another flash of the Dom storyline showing his wife as he dreams about her after getting knocked out. For as well as the Ty part was done, I still cannot bring myself to care about Dom's wife so far. It just feels like an incredibly forced bit of writing. And I know it sounds weird to listen to me ramble on about the first game not having a lot of emotional attachment and then shitting on the second game for trying to do just that, but I honestly just can't help but scoff at these scenes due to how I feel about Dom as a character. He's written like his entire purpose is to be Marcus's best friend. He never shows that much personality. And then suddenly this is his entire driving motivator. I don't know. I'll probably get back to this thought when the story unfolds a bit more. So this entire level is a gimmick, but it's a good one. It's less about fighting waves of enemies and more about simply surviving being inside this giant alien worm. There are gnashing teeth, digestive pools, insects that look like tickers without explosive properties, membranes to saw open, spiky bristles that scrape your skin if you touch them, and so on. This is where Carmine dies, the rookie being sliced and digested by the bugs that claw through his armor and boil him alive with acid. And this is definitely a between stage of writing for the devs, meaning that while Ty's death was near the top and Dom's situation is towards the bottom, Carmine's death is squarely in the middle. You don't necessarily feel bad because he was kind of a dummy, but it's because he was a goofy kid that was fresh out of training that you at least feel something for him. The gimmick level continues as you have to run at certain angles, outpace a wall of debris by shooting open sphincters, avoid jets of acid, sprint through a suffocating haze, and continue to trudge through this uniquely fleshy environment. It honestly feels a bit like an older platformer game like Psychonauts or Banjo-Kazooie with how the colors and hazards look. It is worth noting that Baird's personality has been expanded on much more in this game. Yes, he's still a smartass, but he's a smartass. Like, that's his entire thing. He's worked on decoding locust language, understanding parts of their speech, and continues to work out the worm's physiology while we're in it so that we can hopefully navigate to the heart and kill it. It's a great pivot for him to be less about being an asshole and more about being so smart that he has little patience for others. He did show shades of this in the previous game when repairing various mechanical bits, but that was treated more as a quirk than a genuine intelligence. Cole is still Cole though. He yells, he's loud, he gets shit done. He would probably be pretty fucking annoying to be around in a real-life combat scenario if I'm gonna be honest. Like, I get that he's the funny black man, and I also personally feel that he is indeed both funny and black, but at this stage, I think he kinda just needs to chill and become more relatable, have some kind of scene where he tones down the hype and imparts a little bit more down-to-earth wisdom. Like, I like him, but I don't love him. Do you get what I mean? Why am I asking you this? So you take out the heart, and then the second heart, and then the third heart. It's fucking gross, but kind of fun. And after cutting your way out of the freshly dead worm, Act 2 concludes with the Colonel having a vehicle dropped off so that Delta can continue on to its next objective. And this is where the writing gets interesting, but not in the way that you might think. In the previous game I ragged on and made fun of the coincidental objective scripting. Oh, we coincidentally found this thing, and we coincidentally happened upon this information, and your dad coincidentally was researching this. And the characters never really question these circumstantial findings. So far, the second game has strayed from that kind of writing until this very moment. Because we started as an army marching on the locust hives and have now been ejected to the surface after taking out their weapon of city destruction. The logical step is regrouping, eating a fat meal, sleeping off the wear and tear, but that would mean writing a game where your protagonists are able to ignore this dire, terrible threat that's looming and bearing down on mankind, effectively resetting the story back to the start of the first chapter once more. Yes, you destroyed the worm, but if you rest now, you're gimping your progress. So the answer is to come up with shit to do. And the shit to do is, oh hey, there's a recently declassified military base just down the road, and it should have this crazy data in its computers that will help pinpoint the heart of the enemy base. Because I mean, that shit was fucked, and we had no idea that it was that big down there. And now we've arrived at the same kind of pulling the plot out of our asses bullshit that the previous game had going for it. So what do?
Anybody else's bullshit detector just go off?
Marcus, man, this shit sounds sketch.
That's right, you have the protagonists themselves question the very nature of this sudden, convenient intel. And that's a very smart move, because instead of just having them go, okay boss, you're the boss, hoorah! You now have a potential conspiracy sprinkled into the game's plot that makes this coincidence take a back seat in the player's mind. And this is the topic of discussion as we wade through this government base disguised as a medical facility. Throughout this endeavor, we're no longer talking to the comms lady and are instead speaking with the colonel directly for reasons unknown.
Delta, this is Command. Do you have something to report?
No. Trying to reach Control.
Control is offline for now, Delta. You'll report directly to Command. Keep us posted. Over.
This vague idea that the COG doesn't always have humanity's best interests at heart that was brought up by the Stranded in the first game starts to expand, this seedy bunker revealing to have much more to it when we encounter a door that seems to be guarded by some form of AI. Man, it's kind of crazy how much AI used to be used as this fascinatingly futuristic fictional device of sci-fi media, and now it's just like, okay, yeah, so the door is locked down by AI, now what? Well, the now what amounts to having Baird throw a bomb together and then walking it to the door and then just blowing it open. The actual walking with the bomb sucks ass because Dom just kind of meanders while you're attached to him, but it's not a long segment, thankfully. Blowing up the vault door showcases the extent of what we thought of AI as back in the day, as the computerized voice doesn't seem to take offense at the action, instead treating us as if we had provided proper identification for clearance and beginning to talk us through the secrets that this facility hides. Well, to be fair, it kinda just talks about how secure and clean the place is, as automated turrets pop up everywhere while you navigate these halls. It's another gimmick level that's focused on co-op, although this one might be my favorite not due to its mechanics but due to its accompanying lore implications. Whatever this place was, it was clearly a cover-up for some kind of experimentation on humans. And the wretches that keep bursting free only has you concluding that the locusts were likely former humans that underwent mutations. It's not necessarily the most stunning plot twist, but it does open up a whole new avenue of questioning. Who did this? Why did they do it? What was the point? How did they go about it? We have the where and more than likely the when, but the remaining mysteries are the juiciest ones, and being this close to them makes this level that much more intriguing.
Holy shit. Definitely not POWs. What the hell are these things?
Some kind of stasis tanks. But what's in them? Those aren't wretches.
We may as well talk about new weapons here since our last one is found throughout this facility, and I have to say this game surprisingly only includes 2 new weapons unless you count the mortar launcher and the detached turret, which I'm actually completely fine with. I feel like many sequels have a quota to fulfill that's mandated by their higher-ups, and it leads to oversaturation in the weapon department. Here's the, laser SMG. It's like the regular one, but you know, pew pew! Here's the energy shotgun. You're gonna shit your pants when I tell you what this one's about. So in the case of Gears 2, we have the flamethrower and the burst pistol. That's it. Those are the new additions. One shoot fire, one shoot bursts. Not a big fan of either, but I also don't feel obliged to use them. As you approach the computer containing the data that we're looking for, you gain some snippets of knowledge, something about saving children, heading to some mountain, and leaving this facility under the watch of the AI since they're in the middle of studying something known as the Sires. And that's all we get before things go haywire and said Sires are released into the facility. The AI recommends that you run, and that's a fantastic way to build intrigue and suspense without worrying about the player having all of their questions answered immediately. Hey, so I'm gonna cut in right here because I could have sworn that all of this was explained within the original trilogy, and that sucks because I'm at a high point in this game right now, and I'm pretty fucking stoked about everything that I'm seeing. Past me was happy. This is future me. And here's the fucking problem. This is literally never explained further in any of these games in the original trilogy. The origins of the Locusts are never confirmed. The queen that shows up to taunt the player at the end of the first game is never expanded on. None of these questions are answered until Gears 5 in 2019. I cannot stress how much anguish this caused me towards the end of the video, but we'll get to that. Time to go back to past me now. The Sires themselves are the ugly things shoved into the tube gallery that we waltz through to get to this point. And I could paint them as these intricately designed accumulations of flesh fabricated into an amalgam of top-heavy, muscle-bound mountains of mass, framed by a vaguely xenomorphic but cadaverous head lined with gnashing, needle-like teeth. Or I could just call them zombies, because they're kinda just, well, they just lunge at you like a zombie. And they pull off the zombie formula pretty damn well, as they're especially adept at sponging up bullets and are best dealt with by whipping out the old tried-and-true chainsaw. Thus begins the escape from the facility as the Locusts show up for reasons currently unknown and try to stop our exit. This level is honestly one of the best that Gears has to offer. The intrigue of the story, the design of the environment, the enemies that you face, the tense nature of your escape, all of it is combined with successful gimmicks like the previously mentioned automated turrets and now the weather. As always, the naming conventions for various phenomenon in the Gears universe tends to be as metal and edgy as possible, and the hail is no different. The storm that arrives at the facility instead produces Razor Hail, which is aptly named as the ice has taken on the shape of thousands of glass blades falling from the sky and effectively hurting you the longer that you stay in it. Close enough, welcome back, Krill. As much as I enjoyed the expansion of lore in this game so far, I don't think that Razor Hail is ever explained in terms of how and why it gets as sharp as it does, and why something like a tornado is never produced alongside it. Or shit, I'm sorry, a blood cyclone? I will say that we definitely officially hit the gray-brown era of Xbox 360 games, and there are a few moments where I wondered if my color settings were correct as I fought through this area. It doesn't piss me off or anything, but my god, tabbing back into desaturation is an experience that I'd forgotten about. The level continues to be genuinely good, having you avoid the hail while creating new routes, fighting for your life, and deciding how to proceed. Another new form of beef is added to the enemy roster, the cousin of the Boomer and the Grinder. This one is the Mauler. The names are all hilariously simple, but still describe them adequately as these ones tend to move in with big shields and a flail. You can grab the shield for yourself to utilize as mobile cover, which I've always thoroughly enjoyed. After finally making it out of this asylum, our objective is to head to a mountain for no other reason than because it was mentioned in those files that we just had our robot extract. In a way, this last swath of storytelling follows the exact same story beats of the first game, but it's done so well that you don't really realize it in the moment. I mean, we just went through an area that had a hazard that tears you apart for standing in it, like the Krill. You ran in alongside Dom to extract the data, like the mansion. Baird and Cole stay back to repair the escape vehicle, just like before. You get the data and it points you towards a specific area and you just take off towards it without knowing exactly what you're going to find. It's like they're telling the same story again, but rectifying the lack of detail from the first time around. Now all we need is a train. Instead, we get a tank level on the snowy mountainside, which is an okay enough stage. I mean, the tank doesn't control like ass, which is about the best you can hope for. It has a lot of standard blow these guys up sections, most of which has Marcus shouting,
Reaver!
You creep your way through the mountain, kill off some corpses and brumocks, and eventually find some stranded which have taken shelter down here for no reason beyond plot exposition. Like, the group even has one of the same dudes that you encountered in the first game. So I guess that means they left the city, hiked all the way to wherever this mountain is, and then trekked down into its bowels despite the place obviously being guarded by very high caliber locusts. The only way that this realistically works is if there were like thousands upon thousands of them, and then the handful left here are the ones who happen to survive, but whatever. Plotman gives us the exact instructions to where the locusts seem to be gathering, a place called the Nexus. He also happens to recognize Dom's wife and says that she was probably taken there for slave work or experimentation or whatever.
Maybe she was with one of the other groups that came down before. Stu's group, I think. But Stu and them got captured.
Me when my wife gets shipped to concentration camp. So yeah, you've probably noticed that compared to the first game, this game's plot has been on a steady and impressive climb in terms of substance, interest, and overall writing. And now it seems like we're starting to hit a sharp drop in regards to quality. The reality is that while the team has taken the time to really improve their writing chops, they still don't quite know how to make these substantial leaps in structure make complete sense without relying on convenience. Don't get me wrong, what we've had so far is a night and day improvement, and I don't want to take that away from Gears 2. But it's hard to see that improvement, get used to it, and then watch the writers break out the same crutch that they've been using for all of their major plot points so far. And they could still save this, but how we got to this point should still be noted and not discounted in the overall storytelling. Our next segment is the minecart section from the first game, but longer and on a boat. Well, a chunk of durable plywood at first, but eventually a boat. It is much better, an improvement in every way from the visuals of this brackish cave to the gameplay revolving around needing to fling yourself from one side of the boat to the other. The end of the act has us taking out a Leviathan, which mirrors the first game's Corpser fight, though once again this is a dramatically improved and much more epic encounter overall, one that has stages revolving around sawing tentacles, shooting eyeballs, running into the maw, shooting whip-like tendrils, and eventually tossing grenades down what I believe is scientifically called the Little Mouth. It's a great fight with an enemy that's gnarly as hell and once again raises a question about what this thing is, where it came from, and how it exists. And much like the Razor Hail, we get no answers. The reality is that these phenomena may just be native to the planet of Sarah, and that while it's difficult to explain with our knowledge of how Earth works, there's likely an explanation that would suffice in an alternate reality. So the devs don't need to show their work and can continue to insert stuff like this scot-free without bothering to come up with the nerd shit to back it up. Big man have chainsaw weapon, go attack monster. Sneaking through the back door has Dom insisting that we follow the advice of the old man from earlier in order to track down his wife. I'd complain about this just because I'm still not necessarily a fan of Dom, but it is realistic for the guy to forsake humanity for just a moment in order to save his wife. Marcus tries to dissuade him from this course just due to the fact that there's a minimal chance that she's still alive if she's still down here at all. But Dom insists that Marcus did something similar for his father at one point in their past, which ultimately wins him over. This is once again more set up for a later reveal in the next game revolving around Big Mark's dad, but I'm okay with it this time around just because we've gotten so many more answers in this game compared to the previous one. There's nothing wrong with foreshadowing, but when your entire game becomes foreshadowing, it's not a very fun time. After fighting a bit further in and doing something completely foreign to these games in a sneaking sequence, we eventually locate Maria's... her name's Maria. We eventually locate her torture tube. And for as much as I've been nonplussed with this chunk of the story, I have to say that the execution at the last moment is as close to perfect as you could hope for. Maria walks out completely unscathed and Dom pulls her in for a big hug, but that's not what Marcus sees. He sees his best friend approach a walking corpse, blinded by emotion, and pull her gray figure in for an embrace. The elation of finding the most important person in his life fades fast as Dom pieces together that his wife is basically a tortured husk at this stage.
Marcus, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, man.
No. It's okay.
Like I said, for as in-your-face as the plotline is, this is surprisingly well done, and Marcus realizes what needs to be done before Dom does, leaving his buddy to be alone for a moment. I remember this scene being good, but I think I started talking myself out of it when I realized how manufactured the Maria storyline seemed. But after seeing it play out in its entirety, I have to say that it's worth the inclusion even if it's rough around the edges. As a player, you always want to kill the locusts. They're the bad guys and they do bad things. But there's a distinct difference between, here's this crazy destructive evil that attacks cities, go stop it, and here's this horrific evil army that tortures the life out of humans individually for seemingly no reason. The latter definitely makes you want to get in there and eviscerate this evil once and for all. Though that said, there's a tricky element to all of this that's been raised specifically because of this avenue of writing. Having your bad guys capture and torture humans needs to have a concrete reason beyond because it's an evil thing to do. At least, if you want to create a better story overall. And from what I can tell, there's never a reason given beyond the idea that they hate humanity so much that they're doing it for fun. So yes, this is emotional and we love that about it, but it clashes pretty hard with how efficiently the Locust Horde has dismantled humanity's cities one by one. In fact, they were planning on using the Alaskan bullworm from earlier to take out strategic points so specific that it would eventually destabilize humanity's biggest city and cause it to plummet all at once into the underground. So they're smart enough to cook up a scheme like that, but then they dedicate countless amounts of resources, soldiers for guard shifts, etc. to torture people? For what? Because they hate them? I mean, yeah, sure, I guess that works, but it's just such a bestial reason compared to their precise and unyielding efficiency on the battlefield. It would be one thing if they were getting something out of it, like they use their victims' bone juice for their Wheaties, or they feel like torture brings out the best flavor in humans before they eat them, or something. But they just dedicate resources and build human-sized punishment pipes for the fun of it? I don't know. So our plan now is to just gun our way over into the palace at the center of the Nexus. Which does sound stupid, yes. I mean, if you think about how the first game had a train filled with military personnel that then got hijacked and the only backup was Delta Squad's 4 men, this is about as stupid as that. However, the saving grace is that we aren't the cavalry this time around. Instead, we're to infiltrate the palace and set off a beacon that will alert the military to our location and allow them to send in drop pods for a full-on assault. That one makes a lot more sense. As always, the fights in this game are very well crafted. They're tense, dangerous, and throw in shifting cover mechanics to shake things up as you fight to the center of this hive. Unfortunately, the cheesy, out-of-place dialogue from Dom specifically kind of takes me out of it. Like, the guy just lost his wife after searching for her for presumably years. He doesn't break, which is great. When Marcus asks him how he's feeling at the start of this area, he says he's just doing his best to hang in there and survive. That's perfect. And then not 5 minutes later, we start getting snippets like this.
Our species is destined to rule Sierra. Keep fighting, my children. Your queen is with you.
Yup, definitely the queen.
We cannot be stopped.
We'll see about that, bitch.
The dominant species will prevail. Always.
Damn, can't wait to shut her up! Dominant species? Yeah, right.
We're caught between the devs feeling the need to rightfully insert some touching moments, and then them going about business as usual on a mission to create these Hollywood one-liner moments. And at this stage, I gotta think that the voice actor wasn't given a lot of direction with these lines. Because the natural inclination with that last line in particular is to go, psh, dominant species, yeah, right. But what if instead he had been directed to say it more under his breath, like he's genuinely pissed off and annoyed with these evil monsters? Something along the lines of, dominant species? Yeah, right. I don't know, maybe it's just as poor of a line for the guy who's supposed to be on a rampage, but I feel like they could have workshopped it to make it feel more in line with the overall tone. Regardless, the gameplay does make up for all of this as you get to play with mortars, detached turrets, and creative cover. Throughout the march, the Queen uses an intercom system to tell her troops to keep fighting, which is strange because there definitely has to be more than just the number of locusts that are coming at us, and we're the only humans down here right now. You would think it would be much more of an endless stream of enemies swarming us. We at least solve our lone wolf status when we set off the beacon and watch as countless drop pods begin funneling into the Nexus and making this war a little bit more fair. We meet up with Cole and Baird once more as Delta Squad is reunited at last. As you continue to fight your way to the Queen, your squad raises more questions for you to focus on. Namely, why are these things so hell-bent on reaching the surface? How did they build all of this? Aren't they thriving down here? And that's when the other shoe drops. We haven't been getting swarmed by the full might of the Locust because there's been an ongoing civil war in these caves the entire time. We're greeted with the sight of locusts fighting other locusts, which is the last thing that anyone expected, but a great twist nonetheless. And it makes complete sense. I mean, the locusts have nearly always been portrayed as this overwhelming threat so severe that it's a miracle that humanity hasn't perished by now. Their numbers are staggering, their tactics are crushing, their organic weaponry is unpredictable, and yet somehow the COG has been able to hunker down and launch multiple offensives. It shouldn't be possible given the threat that they face, and yet they've been able to against all odds. And this civil war is why. Humans are a nuisance to the Locust horde, but not a real threat in their minds. The real threat is this new breed of Locust, which is familiar from the first game, the Lambent. If I had to guess, this is a bit of a redaction from the writers, though not a severe one, because Lambent wretches did fight alongside the likes of General Rom in the first game. But now that idea has been repurposed, showcasing a new breed of locust that glows with emulsion, and seems to be inherently more erratic and feral in its movements. Eventually we make it to the central computer where the Locust Queen's recorded voice has been coming from.
The world is ripe for their hour!
Delta Squad is in your house, bitch! You hear that shit? Your grubby-ass bitches are going down! Like way down! Dead down! So down you ain't gonna even know which way is up! Your ass is gonna be crying to your skink-ass queen! Oh, mommy, you let the bad man hurt us! Fuck you! We gonna whoop your mama's ass! Wow!
God, I love Cole. Immediately after disabling the droning of the Queen, another file is discovered, containing an audio recording from Marcus's dad, who we still know nothing about beyond him being involved in the military somehow. Just now, the Queen had been rambling about sinking the final human city of Jacinto in order to kill the Lambent part of the Horde for good. Well, Marcus's dad is saying basically the same thing, his voice tumbling out of the computer and claiming that the Locusts can be defeated by sinking Jacinto. Marcus doesn't question this in the slightest, claiming that while the Queen may plan to have her people evacuated before sinking Jacinto, that we can always plunge the last bastion of humanity when they aren't expecting it so that we can kill every Locust at once. There is no further thought given as to why Adam Phoenix's voice is on this computer, just that this is a solid backup plan if killing the Queen doesn't work to end this threat. Baird at least tosses out the idea that this is fucking batshit crazy, but Marcus is like, well, Dad said it, so it's a good call.
Yeah, well, screw my old man.
When we finally make it to the Queen, Delta is baffled by her human appearance before she sicks her right-hand man on us. Before that, though, she comments that she had hoped that Marcus would have followed in his father's footsteps. Instead of taking the time to explain what she means, she simply commands Scourge here to attack before traipsing off. I know they wanted to make this more of a two-player co-op thing, but I always found it stupid that Scourge allows Baird and Cole to run after the Queen while the other two face him down. The fight itself is less like the Rom fight and more like, I guess closer to that Leviathan fight before this, as in you're just waiting to be able to inflict damage while dodging grenades, tickers, pillars, and stalactites as they fall towards you. After getting through 3 button mashing sections, my man decides to hop on his ride, which crashes through the window, mirroring a particular Drakari exit that I saw semi-recently. I can't believe Gears of War 2 ripped off of Rogue Trader. From here we hijack some Reavers, and the next few segments involve using them to escape back to Jacinto.
And for as, I don't know, video gamey as it looks, it's actually really damn fun given the circumstances. It isn't anything super special mechanically, as you have your whole front and back guns and you can only really dodge with the thing as it charges forward, but the whole idea of escaping on an enemy mount, using it to assist gears who are plummeting down to this level, taking out other war machines and then jetting out of the caverns, it's just good fun. Scourge persists in chasing you, causing another structured fight where you evade rockets, shoot limbs when his Reaver tries to grab you, pop it in the mouth, dodge it when it tries to eat you, and so on. It's also very fucking cool, and the end result has him crashing while you fly to Jacinto and land at the command base. The final chapters of this game are about as much as you could ask for from it, as COG Command has decided to go through with the sinking of the city. Of course, this is still a ridiculous plan, and you can dismiss it as showing how desperate humanity truly is here. That's fine, but there's still this underlying story going on here that we haven't gotten answers to. Marcus was in prison when he was picked up initially. His dad seems to have some kind of connection to the Locusts. And now the chairman of the COG says, well, it turns out that your dad was right after all.
But it looks like your father was right all this time.
Imagine that.
So you can assume that Adam Phoenix was also viewed as some kind of traitor or something along those lines at one point, and now the COG is blindly following his model for defeating the Locust Horde. There's something that just isn't adding up, and it almost feels like an alternative story where the COG ignores Adam's seemingly insane plan and then Marcus decides to do everything that he can to sink Jacinto anyway would have been the better story at this stage. But let's give the writers a chance and see how this all plays out. So everything is in place to sink Jacinto. People are evacuated, structural weak points have been identified. All that's left is to hold off this final assault while we get our soldiers extracted from the underground after we set off a fucking beacon to get them down there in the first place. Imagine that. Still, these final fights are so damn cool that it's hard to fault the writers for creating the circumstances leading to them. It just feels like the actual last stand in every way, as even the Colonel joins the fray to see Jacinto's final moments for himself. This is pretty much the rest of the game, just non-stop fighting and some more harshly designed battles as Delta Squad is assigned to clearing out a structural weak point underneath Jacinto in one final push. The Locusts have figured out our plan and are guarding it with whatever bulk of forces that they can spare from the Lambent attacks, leaving Marcus and Dom to clean them up while Bear and Cold help out with the light mass bomb that will be used for the weak point detonation. In a way, it's just a remix of the previous game's beats, but with more story, more battles, and more satisfying visuals. Your ending sprint has you falling a lot. But then you get to ride a Brumach, so it's all good. The Brumach section feels less satisfying overall than the Reaver ride, but it has its moments where you feel nearly invincible. There's a lot of destructible environment going on, something that has been a part of the game since the start, but not to this degree. It's actually pretty damn impressive for 2008. Once you down the 3 pillars, the bomb crew comes in, and at this point the Brumach begins freaking out, which leads into what I was getting at in the first game's Corpser fight. The fumes and the direct touch of the emulsion begin transforming the Brumach, causing it to go lambent, which is awfully fast. And that's why the idea of lambency feels more like a redaction than something that the writers intended from the beginning, because the initial Corpser probably should have undergone something similar when it got dumped. I think there was a point about the light mass bomb changing the fundamental structure of the emulsion that the devs tried to shoehorn in to explain this change, but I don't recall it ever going into any sort of satisfactory depth. Regardless, the transformation on display is downright impressive, an alien xenomorph adjacent metamorphosis that is simultaneously creepy and imposing. Your final fight isn't particularly inspired despite this, as you kinda just hammer of dawn the thing until it explodes, creating our makeshift bomb for us and beginning Jacinto's destabilization once and for all. The difference in tone between the first and second game's ending is night and day. The first game almost felt like a buddy cop movie ending, as if Dom and Marcus were about to go hit up a burger joint after all was said and done. The second game is bittersweet, an ending that showcases the awesome destruction that humanity inflicted on itself. The Locust Horde is thought to be swept away by seawater as the explosions ring out and cause the last symbol of humanity's advancement to perish alongside its greatest foe. Dom glances at the photo of his wife once more, while Marcus repeatedly tries to hail the comms lady. I suppose she's earned a name at this point, since there's actually a focus on her well-being at this stage. There had been hints of Marcus caring for her before, but nothing like this as he screams over the mic in the hopes that she will respond. I guess she can't hear him because Anya is just sitting on the other chopper across from them along with Cole, and she responds to his distress with a little gesture before the curtain closes. The entire time, the Locust Queen reminds the player that there's more story that hasn't quite been explored. Her survival and narration is a sobering needle in our side that what we just did may have not been the end of the threat that humanity faces. And to cap everything off, the post-credit sequence promises one more game as Adam Phoenix calls out to the void.
This is Adam Phoenix. Can you hear me? What have you done?
Once again, Gears of War proves that it doesn't always know how to write a story without convenience guiding its protagonists. The second entry was much better about this and was a godsend of improvement in every conceivable way. But the string that ties these games together is once again that reliance on convenience. And I would argue that even though I had a much better time playing the second game, this dependence is a much bigger issue overall. Because you never really take the first game super seriously, right? And neither did the developers. It did have its moments, sure, but the writers were never really interested in exploring too many topics as much as they were with just introducing them. So you kind of just take these moments where the former prisoner gets promoted or the squad member scoops up the world-saving intel at the last second, and then you just kind of shrug and keep playing. You get to the credits and the ending song sounds like this.
Yeah, bring it on, sucker. This my kind of shit. Yeah, bring it on, sucker. This my kind of shit.
Nothing is really that serious. But now we've got an entry where the writing becomes much more fleshed out, where ideas are being defined and sculpted into much more than just junk food. And the writers not being able to shake this bad habit is now a much bigger detriment for overall enjoyment. Because let's face it, there's a point in this game where Delta Squad is dispatched to a top secret base to get top secret info that just happened to be sitting out here this entire time. Then they use that top secret info to infiltrate the enemy center. And while this can be dismissed, it's taken a step further when the main character sees something that's supposedly from his dad, and he goes, "Oh shit, let's just do what he says." This is despite seeing an AI with a scientist's voice attached to it not more than a few hours before this. It's one thing to have the main character be blinded by how he perceives his dad. We still don't know if he reveres him, loves him, and takes his word as truth no matter what, or hates him and generally admonishes him but still respects him as a scientist. I mean, the most we have to go off of is the "screw my old man" dialogue. But we do know that Marcus trusts in his ideas. Okay, fine. But when you make it back to the surface, every single semblance of humanity's current leadership goes, "Wow, cool, let's do what this science man tells us to do despite us apparently not trusting him before." Like, what set of circumstances had to be in play for this exact scenario to work out? Like I said, it's one thing if Marcus goes AWOL and performs what he thinks is the best route for humanity himself without the blessing of the government. Or if the government goes, "Fuck, we're so desperate that we might as well just do this." But you have a leadership that hears from a guy that they apparently thought was wrong before, and now they suddenly think he's right? And we just happen to find his plans for killing off the Horde in the enemy stronghold? And nobody questions that this is where we got it from? Nobody goes, "Wait, you found this in the Locust computers? Should we maybe think about this a little bit more?" Of course they don't, because we once again conveniently found the answer in the most dangerous place in the world, brought it up to the surface with the conveniently placed reavers that we can conveniently ride without issue, and the government is conveniently desperate enough to sink the one city that they've held on to for this entire war. Gears of War has so many components to it to create brilliance. And honestly, it did with the majority of its facets, but there's still this dark mark when it comes to storytelling, something that the writers couldn't shake through the first two games no matter how hard they tried. So let's see if they can pull it off when they put all of their secrets out on the table in Gears of War 3. Spoiler alert, they do not. Strangely enough, there's an optional scene that you can watch recapping what happened in the previous games, but also what happened in the aftermath of Gears 2. It seems almost mandatory in that regard, and yet here it is, tucked behind a menu option. As Anya puts it, humanity relocated to an island before a sudden flood of Lambent began to attack, resetting the war to day one yet again and causing humanity to split into smaller groups. Some stood on the island, others took to ships, and the last group tried their hand at re-establishing themselves on the mainland. Except this time the cog is gone, dissolved after its leader abandoned the world, effectively making every remaining survivor stranded. It's a fun twist, though I gotta say the whole "and then they attacked again" storyline is getting a little bit tired at this point. Thank God Gears 3 is the last one, right? I know that these guys very likely planned for a trilogy from the start. Maybe the first game was supposed to thoroughly explore every topic brought to light and it turned out to be too much. When it saw success, they likely planned out the future games with certain topics in mind. But I gotta say that it's a little strange how the first game mentioned Adam Phoenix offhandedly, the second game told you a little bit more about him, and now the third game just completely goes in on his story and relationship to his son. This is seen even in the collector's editions for these games. The first one stands in its red and black thick metal case, almost a reference to the bulky metal armor that's strapped to Gears, a game that's all about style and lacking substance. Inside, an art book sits loosely with the bare minimum securing the game in place. The case is almost too big for its contents, as if the designers thought they would be cramming more into it but ran out of time. The second game slimmed down, a tasteful art book slid snugly against a trim metal case, a photo of Dom and Maria tucked into the packaging neatly. It meant business like the first entry, but it had a story to tell, one that was so important and in your face that the designers couldn't help but squeeze it into the box, almost shouting at the player in an attempt to have them take it seriously. But the third game, it's immediate in its message. It doesn't so much scream at the player as it does bluntly tell them that this is the end. Its contents are presented like the whole case is a COG service medal, and it's presented to one Adam Phoenix. Inside, a flag awaits you alongside the obligatory art book. But those are distractions from the real main contents, as the last will and testament of Adam Phoenix lies here, along with Phoenix family keepsakes and the scientist's work on the Hammer of Dawn schematics. The story is laid out in this collector's edition box, but it isn't as ham-fisted as a photo of two people. It isn't as simple as man who lost his wife during a war. It immediately promises a much more elaborate story, a story of a man who produced a weapon of mass destruction so powerful that it killed millions. Hang on to this idea because it never becomes what the collector's edition box seems to promise to the player. Marcus wakes up in his cell once again. He awaits his demise as locusts continue to batter the prison. Again, he's rescued.
Jack, rip that door.
What are you doing here?
Getting you out. Here.
Put this on.
I made it.
You could get into a lot of trouble for doing this.
Not anymore.
Things have changed. It's your father. He needs you.
He walks out after Anya, his surroundings decaying and twisting into another chapter of this dream. You're told about what he did to get him into prison at last, a cruel twist of fate where Adam Phoenix refused to leave his work behind.
It was always his work my father cared about. His research.
Despite disobeying orders and trying to cover his dad, Marcus watched as his father was buried in rubble, presumably dying on the spot. He was served a life sentence for treason, for getting his unit killed. And that's when he wakes back up on a ship at sea, being called for duty. This is a solid, all-around good bit of storytelling, a good way to open a game. But the only reason that it is as solid as it is because of all of the story that we've played through already in the previous games. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that say, yeah, so what? That's what a sequel is about. And you are right to a degree. But let me put it this way. I've never watched Batman Begins. I was a little younger when it came out and just never got around to watching it. When The Dark Knight came out, I saw it in theaters twice and watched it 2 more times at home after it released on DVD. It was amazing, and it wasn't until years later that I found out that it was the second movie in a trilogy. Simply put, the movie stands on its own. The context from Begins helps certain parts of it, but it isn't necessary to watch it in order to enjoy The Dark Knight. And this comes down to 2 different conflicting philosophies. Some people believe that if your game or movie stands on its own and not as a sequel, then it's a bad sequel. But I'm of the mind that a good piece of media can still stand on its own despite being a sequel. It can have references, and maybe the viewer or player won't understand those references, but can still generally enjoy what they're viewing. I think Mass Effect 2 is a good example of this. You don't necessarily need to play the first game. You're not going to understand everything in the second game if you don't, but you're still going to enjoy the second game. So let's apply this same formula to Gears. Say that Gears of War 1 started out with this exact scene verbatim. This soldier is in jail, a girl saves him, it turns out that he's dreaming while narrating what happened with his dad. Yes, I'm still intrigued. Yes, the visuals and story beats are fun to follow along, but in this reality, I fundamentally do not care about Marcus Phoenix shouting out to his dad as he's crushed under rubble. In fact, I would probably find it a little cheesy. Simply put, I don't think this scene stands on its own, and it feels more like a relief to get answers to questions that we've had from the very first game going back to the very first scene. I'm not trying to be pedantic, and I'm sure there's gonna be people who are sitting here going, dude, of course, this is how a sequel works. But I honestly feel like we could have had this exact information about Marcus's imprisonment and his relationship to his father spelled out in the first game, and it would have only made the series stronger because a lot more context would be added to a lot of little interactions in the first 2 games. Maybe it's just how video games are made, you never know what's going to flop, and if Gears had underperformed, it would have been this goofy little hidden gem that gamers discuss while lamenting a lack of sequel. So why bother going all out if you're unsure about whether it will succeed or not? Regardless of all this speculation, the third game is the most decidedly different in every way beyond combat mechanics. It takes itself the most seriously of the bunch and is initially pitched more like a movie. The game logo isn't splashed on the screen front and center, instead appearing more subtly in the corner. Developer credits roll on the sidebar as you walk around and explore your surroundings. You find Marcus on one of the ships that navigate the ocean, spiraling around death constantly. The story has seemingly evolved beyond just killing bad guys. Dom now looks more weathered with a full beard and has taken up the role as the ship's botanist. Anya is now suited up, a lieutenant in the field who also reprises her communications role. It just feels completely different, and it's kind of fascinating to see this break from a powerful military entity to the remnants of what once was. Along the way, we meet with a new squad member known as Jace, who seems pretty average and normal at the moment, almost guaranteed a death down the road. Marcus did call over to him once in Gears of War 2, but that's all we ever really heard from him up until this point. Baird and Cole are mentioned offhandedly in various conversational bits and notes found around the ship. The developers did a great job of making this place feel like survivors who are trying not to break, falling into a routine of military code more because it's what they know and not what they believe in. The story kicks off 2 years after Jacinto fell, on a day when the former Chairman Prescott decides to reappear after abandoning the COG 18 months ago. Obviously, nobody here believes in his authority anymore, but they welcome him anyway as he lands his chopper on the ship. It's actually kind of interesting to see how the writers portrayed this entire interaction. As a player, an outsider to this reality, you see this guy who abandoned humanity and you think, these guys are gonna throw him in a cell and tear him limb from limb. They won't listen to his authority. And that's the vibe that Marcus and the crew are giving you also. But there's something very human about what happens here. The chairman strolls out of his chopper, hands Marcus a data disk, and begins barking orders as if he had never left. And these guys kind of just let it happen. You have to understand that for years, maybe even decades, Chairman Prescott was basically the king of the planet for all intents and purposes. It was ingrained in these people to obey him. And after he left, they likely talked shit nonstop about what they would do if he reappeared. But muttering to yourself and imagining scenarios where he resurfaces is often going to be different from how you actually react when he shows up suddenly. You didn't have time to think or plan out what you're going to say, and instead you just kinda, watch him do his thing. So seeing these guys kind of just take it, well, it's kind of realistic. I'm unsure if it was intentionally written to be this way or not, but if it was, that's a pretty big improvement to the writing right off the bat. We obviously get our first taste of the Lambent, who invade the ship in an attack from the waters. They seem to spawn from these twisted, gnarly-looking stalks that jut up from the ocean like vines, ignoring what you would think should be possible for them. They are also entirely feral, serving as more of a hive mind intelligence rather than having individual traits. They don't speak like the locusts did, they just attack. They glow, they explode when they die, they fight relentlessly. Enemy types have changed despite drones still being the mainstay. Drudges are the bigger version, which are drones that have sunk further into lambency and have morphed much like the Brumok that we saw at the end of the second game. They have different forms depending on how far they've evolved, which is kind of fun, but generally winds up feeling more annoying than cool to fight. Most of these enemies tend to invade via repurposed grub holes, which were the craters that opened up in the previous games to shoot out enemies. This time the grub holes are instead big stalks which you have to shoot the bulbs off of. Beyond that we have the polyps, which seem to be the smallest and least evolved form of Lambent. And they seem to attempt to latch on to people, and they're the Flood. Epic Games made the Flood in their universe. Kinda seems less interesting and impressive when you put it that way, huh? But I mean, that's kind of what the Lambent have become for the final installment in the trilogy. Regardless, Marcus and the crew stomp through the Lambent to get to the upper decks, viewing the data disk that the chairman tossed their way.
Marcus, it's your father.
Yeah, no fucking shit, lady.
Yeah, I noticed.
You can tell that the writers wanted to impart this information to the player without Marcus going, "Daddy?" But I mean, that would have been pretty fucking funny if he did. So Adam basically tells the gang here that he's been captured by the Locusts for years, and that he had been trying to contact them and failing repeatedly. He's now cooked up a plan to destroy the Lambent, which sounds a bit like the second game's plot point, but whatever. Marcus is shocked that his dad is still alive, but there isn't a ton of time to think as he now has to push back through the invading Lambent to get to the chairman. Of course, ensuring that he's alive is a little bit secondary to, well, the ship being sunk. So after checking on his boo-boos and telling him that we're gonna talk later, it's back to fighting. So let's talk combat differences since there aren't really a lot. First off, you have to hold down the X button to pick up ammo. Stupid ass decision. Next up, the Hammer Burst. It has an aim down sights function now and is a semi-automatic weapon, which makes it amazing. Third, I still can't aim for shit, not really a combat difference, but I thought I'd let you know. And fourth, you can now command your squad to single out certain enemies if you'd like, which is a great addition to the game overall, even if I didn't use it that often. Beyond that, everything explodes now, which does make for much less satisfying kills if I'm going to be honest. There's something about locust heads exploding and making that ridiculously over-the-top sound effect that was just so damn fun. Lambent heads still do that, but then the bodies also explode, so it's like, I don't know, it goes from JFK to Halo popcorn flood. I will not be elaborating further. Now it's about this time that a Lambent Leviathan attacks the ship, and you have to wonder how any human is still alive with this amount of threat occurring at any given time. But yeah, this thing begins tearing into the ship, causing you to pilot a new type of vehicle, the Silverback. Well, less of a vehicle and more of a bionic suit thing. It's fun enough to use. It's got a stomp, a turret, some rockets. I know it sounds like I'm nonplussed by this whole thing, but you have to understand that both this game so far and Gears 2 has been non-stop back-to-back-to-back action scenes with stints of combat that has explosions rocking the screen and rivaling Michael Bay with their frequency. So like, I can continue to go, wow, this is so cool, but I'd be saying that for every single battle? So yeah, Silverback shoots Leviathan, which is disgusting because it seems to be a host to polyps that shoot out of its eye sockets when you pop them. I mean, you have to understand the sheer amount of horror subgenres that we've jumped through in this series so far. You had the more stay quiet, be stealthy horror of a berserker in the first game, which soon turns into an actual monster chasing you. You had the horror of thousands of bats devouring people like a plague of locusts. You had the horrors of war and POW torture. You had the horrors of a mental institution that seemed to experiment on its subjects. You've obviously always had the more gory body horror of people getting sawed in half and stuff like that. And now you have something wholly inspired by parasites and aliens combined into this new to the series kind of disgust-based horror. It's actually kind of impressive, all things considered, like the developers wanted to tour through all of these genres and pay homage to them at least briefly. I guess you could say that it's unfocused, like the game doesn't always have its own identity, and that is very true when it comes to these horror elements. But those have always been secondary to the franchise, a complement to the non-stop action that comes with staving off a world-ending threat through clever tactics and military might. Or convenience, but you know, whatever, like fucking pretend it's all tactics, dude. Either way, Baird cooks up a plan to destroy the Leviathan once and for all, dumping hundreds of tickers onto its head all at once.
Hey, I thought you'd enjoy the witty irony of Grub on Glowy Island. Yeah, fucking hilarious. You're gonna blow up the whole ship, genius!
In a way, Gears never lost its goofiness, it just refined it. Whereas the first game had soldiers constantly firing off little quips and sarcasm, the third game tends to save moments like these for when you least expect it, which is a lot more effective. Although that said, it is very possible that I've just gotten used to these random unfunny remarks that pop up here and there, because I'd be remiss to pretend like they just don't happen.
Oh, that's nasty!
Thanks, Jace, glad you're here. The scene fades out, surprisingly flashing back to an hour prior and following the antics of Cole and Baird as they seem to be hunting for supplies or the like back in Cole's hometown. This is a really cool part of the game that has you taking on the role of somebody besides Marcus for once. You're accompanied by two new faces, one familiar and one not. Another Carmine makes his way into the story, though this one is less about being the newbie on the battlefield and is a certified veteran, the oldest of the brothers. Meanwhile, the brand new face is another woman. Actually, this is a pretty cool point in terms of how the game's universe has shifted, because it was pretty openly declared that under the COG, men were the ones that had to fight and women were usually relegated to breeding farms. Like, I know that sounds fucked up, and it is, but these were also potentially the last moments of humanity, so making more humans became a priority. Now with the COG dissolved, women like Anya and now Sam are seen taking up the role of a warrior and fighting alongside men. I'd love for the game to get into the semantics of how former COG soldiers saw the sudden uptick in women fighters, maybe how they initially treated them or felt about this change, but that might be a little too much to ask of a 2010 shooter. And even then, it's a fine line between a good story about potential oppression that women faced and something that's overly placating and feels like it was shoved in because a corporate overlord demanded something for a liberal audience. So instead, we kind of get a lot of quips revolving around Sam being a woman.
Well, we ain't got any spare food. And if we did, we wouldn't be trading it with you COG assholes. Ooh. I'll give you a side of bacon for her, though.
Oh, bacon.
Now, the main thing to point out about all of this is that this is one of the first times that we get to witness Cole in moments where he isn't fighting for his life, at least outside of the stranded camp in the first game. And thankfully, the writers must have realized that having him hoop and holler about every little thing would be obnoxious. So instead, we get to see him outside of that element, watching as he delegates a precarious situation with the survivors here, and he calmly requests information without yelling about putting his foot up their asses. It's a perfect way to properly get the player closer to Cole. If he's more normal and gracious outside of the dangerous moments and turns on his thrashball player persona to amp himself up, then that's a fantastic way to round him out as a character.
Huh. You ever feel like you did, but nobody told you?
Now, I gotta put this out there now because it's something that I realized right around this coal train excursion. I do not have as much fun in this game compared to the previous ones. Maybe it's playing 3 games back to back like this and I'm just used to the excitement now, but I honestly don't have the same amount of interest in fighting the Lambent. I don't know what it is. I mean, fundamentally, they still kind of do the same thing as the Locusts, right? They take cover, they shoot, they have melee troops that close in, but I just don't have the same kind of interest in trying to aim for headshots. Maybe it's the fact that they all explode. Maybe it's because their blood has a China censorship yellow hue to it. I really don't know for sure. But if I were to hazard a guess, it's because they feel more like zombies than enemy combatants. While the general combat is the same, it just feels more like I'm trying to survive an unfeeling, unthinking glob of yellow piss rather than tactically taking out an enemy who's employing a set of tactics of their own. I go from trying to take out strategic enemies like snipers or turrets first to just shooting whatever the fuck I see first and not bothering aiming for anything besides center of mass. I feel stupid grabbing a sniper rifle or a shotgun because I tend to get rushed by enemies that explode on contact. So sniping feels unfulfilling because I have tentacled monsters stomping towards me, and shotguns feel unfulfilling because I take damage when I shoot something point blank that rushes me. I found that the most fun that I had was during the quieter moments, exploring the old grocery store, checking out the thrash ball field, shit like that. I do respect the devs for trying to do something different, and it's kind of a shame that despite the effort, this is how I feel about the end product. Your new array of gimmicks are actually a lot more, I guess, civilian, if that makes sense. Like, you aren't jumping inside a big worm or riding a raft or anything like that. Instead, you're picking up a fire extinguisher and putting out fires. You're getting into a loader and transporting groceries. And I get the theme of it, like this is the kind of shit that you have to do now as a Stranded, something that we have to do to survive. But it's still really lame. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it meshes well with the Gears of War formula. Either way, at this point, Cole begins insisting on helping out the other random people out here in this wasteland, claiming that they're just like us and not the freaks that soldiers like Baird used to see them as. Which again, more points for Cole in his personality development. Aiding a nearby stranded outpost has them recognizing the former star, to which he tries to capitalize on by leveraging a trade.
We haven't got any food to spare, but we might have something else you need. I meant supplies.
That's like the third joke about women providing sex in like 30 minutes. It's actually kind of impressive. Imagine that shit flying in a modern BioWare game, the internet would go into a frenzy. Although, at the same time, women have tended to be in leadership positions out here, so it's an interesting mix. Oh, also, Carmine has been in near-death situations like 2 or 3 times so far, the expectation that he'll die now front and center in the writing. Cole continues to his former home stadium, excited to revisit his past glories. The Stranded all seem to recognize and adore him, ecstatic to see one of the last celebrities on Sarah in their midst. Of course, Cole's no less enamored by his own past, and walking into the musty locker room of his former team has him reliving his greatest achievements, a scene that stretches on as he suits up and listens to the audience cheer him on. He truly was the Jared Goff of this universe. I don't know, I love this sequence. Watching Cole slip into a delusion of the past that mingles with reality is really fun as he grabs a nearby bomb and runs it like a football to the stalk that's popped up in the middle of the field. Although Baird was revealed to have been a fan of one of Cole's rival teams, you can tell that he respects the big man's athletic ability, something that used to be primarily counted on for entertainment and not survival. This is about the time when the ship is attacked, and these guys beat feet back towards the center of a bridge where it's supposed to be passing under since they don't have access to evac at the moment. Thankfully, this is when some Locust remnants make their move, having taken refuge at this bridge for who knows how long now. And man, it really is just night and day. I'm focusing on turrets and snipers first, I'm aiming for heads, I'm wishing I had a sniper rifle. It's just such a difference in how I play when these enemies are involved. I mean, it almost feels like the devs went, let's go back to the old formula because I'm just having fun again. Boomers are coming out, drones are tossing incendiary grenades, and their whole operation has gotten about as desperate as humanity has. They've even taken to repurposing old Lancer models to create makeshift turrets, acting like Stranded themselves. The retro Lancer is a cool-ass idea, basically taking the old reliable Mark II and giving it more punch but also a lot more recoil. And of course, instead of a chainsaw, we have a bayonet attachment that allows us to charge enemies with impunity. Well, as long as they don't fucking explode on contact. Still kinda hard to justify any sort of close-range combat with the Lambent, something that's a cornerstone to the Gears formula. Maybe that's what I'm missing. One of the nearby artifacts for lore actually makes mention of when and why the Lancer was refitted with a chainsaw, which I thought was pretty fun. Apparently, Ty once killed a Locust right at the start of the war with a chainsaw, inspiring none other than Adam Phoenix to figure out a way to seamlessly mount one onto the COG's rifles. As much as I haven't gone out of my way to find the heaps of optional lore in these games, I do have to admit that I enjoy reading it more than I thought I would, especially when it actually takes the time to flesh out the universe in a way that's more than just, I think the Locusts have their own language. Because let's be honest, we're never doing anything with Locust linguistics beyond commenting on how it looks different. The other thing to note about all of this is that with the Locusts back on the menu, so are executions, which have evolved to now showcase something different depending on which weapon you have equipped. Which, I mean, come on, that's fucking amazing. Like, I'll honestly risk going down or dying to test out a new execution style with a weapon that I haven't used yet. And I'll also hold on to weapons that I otherwise would have no interest in using for the same reason, which tells me that this is a great addition to the game. Act 1 ends with Cole's perspective of the ticker bomb on the Leviathan. The bridge collapses afterwards and the unit miraculously washes up ashore intact and just in time to witness a parade of Locusts on their way to what we assume is one crashed ship. Now, despite the semi-weak start, this is where things wade back into fascinating territory. The Locust reemergence was just the start of what the developers cooked up here, as they now spring out of the ground with a wholly savage look to them. They look less like a unified troop of tactically minded soldiers and now deploy almost guerrilla-esque tactics as they pop out clad in makeshift barbaric armor. They come with new variations on old enemies, including tickers that don't explode but instead eat the ammo and weapons left around the field, boomers that can launch their explosives underground, creating a digging fault line as the grenade burrows its way towards you and pops up in your face, and siege beast catapults that launch some kind of organic explosive from afar. It's just really fucking cool, and it honestly wouldn't be possible to have this degree of flavor without a storyline that has the Locusts facing this amount of hardship. When we sync up with Anya and Jace, they're in the midst of holding off Locusts as Prescott lies dying on a nearby stretcher. His final words are cryptic, claiming that Adam Phoenix is holed up in some kind of research facility that was besieged by the Locust Queen not too long ago. He hands us an encrypted disk and then dies on the spot, leaving Delta Squad scratching their heads with a vague idea of where to go, seeing as Prescott specifically mentions the former Colonel Hoffman by name. When Baird does get the disc to a state where it can play back some video, what's revealed is that Adam Phoenix was abducted from his estate by Chairman Prescott. And this is probably the first time that I've been genuinely invested in discovering what's going on in a Gears game just based off of the breadcrumb trail now laid out before me. Yes, of course I've wanted to know about the origin of the Locust Horde and all of that kind of stuff. But the series has only ever vaguely teased the answers without really having the protagonists focus on them. This might be the first time where a game is now actively leading you to genuinely interesting riddles and staying on topic until you get to the answers. The gameplay aids in this new peaking of interest as the combat now feels apocalyptic, almost Mad Max adjacent. Like these new wild Locusts are just fucking fun to fight in every way, and the random crazy ass equipment that they employ is amazing.
Among the new weaponry is the likes of sawed-off shotguns, cleavers, and the aforementioned digging guns, all of which makes the flavor of battle feel that much more chaotic, less uniform, and overall just stellar. I mean, this is probably the most fun that I've had in a Gears game, which is crazy given how I was feeling in Act 1. To complement the absurdity, our goal is to now track down a Locust hot air balloon, hijack it, and pilot it to our destination. This involves running through trenches, participating in a pseudo-stealth section where our goal is to take out the guards as loudly as we can, and avoiding bombing runs from the hot air balloons above us. Which, fucking awesome as you might expect. Now, for all the compliments that I just paid the game, I have to say that I nearly burst out laughing at the scene following all of this.
Anyway, I grabbed the nav system from that wrecked barge. One direct course to Anvil Gate, programmed and ready.
I mean, this is quite literally the same sequence of events from the first game when Baird grabbed the random thing that gave us information to proceed. It's gotta be intentional at this point, right? Like, these guys have to be poking fun at themselves. Nah, I think if they were, they would be a little bit more direct about it, honestly. Anyways, the devs continue to capitalize on this momentum as they give you a little tour of how the Locust forces are assembled. Locust forces are assembled. I don't give a shit. Which is a really great addition to the game that makes sense given the context. Yes, they absolutely could have had you touring all of this kind of stuff in the previous game, the Corpser hatcheries, the ticker assembly lines, and whatever else kind of crazy organic war machine manufacturing facilities that the Locusts have going on. But it would also mean creating a scenario where you're actively infiltrating the outskirts of the enemy operations and then marching towards the center without being cut off or killed. Not only would it make these already improbable scenarios of surviving the heart of the Locust Horde that much more unrealistic, it would also be a ton of work that stretches the game on longer than the devs likely had. So seeing these instances occur on the surface where the Locusts have relocated not only makes sense thematically, but it makes sense when you're trying to feed the player the answers to the mysteries of this 3-game recurring enemy. Plus, let's be honest, this intrigue creates a very satisfying tour as you're stomping to your destination. The core design philosophy of these games is a linear railroad. You're not choosing different outcomes, you're not exploring side routes, you're not gaining perk points. You don't have a build. These games can't be slapped with the RPG tag, which is crazy because the RPG tag encompasses everything now. The only decisions that you make is which weapons you're choosing, whether you're taking the left or the right path, and whether you want to peek around a corner for extra lore bits. It's just the nature of a 2000s cover shooter, something that the industry kind of outgrew over time. Like I said, I've never played anything beyond Gears 3, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if Gears 5 had a leveling perk system with a semi-open world that has you choosing where you're going next, or something along those lines. Maybe throw in a customize your weapon system. I could slap on stickers, some paint, and sometimes I can make the fucking gun have more bullets in it, I don't know. It's just the direction that the industry has taken over time, and even previously linear games like the Metro series have gone down this path. So keeping what Gears used to be in mind, you're building a game that always has the same enemies in the same locations while you have the same goals and the same set of weapons to accomplish said goals. It's truly not a bad thing. Games with action-focused first just used to be this way before they evolved into this new kind of standard. Everything from God of War to Metal Gear to Mario had this same sort of linearity. So what Gears tended to do well in this regard was create highly polished stages that consistently gave you fun things to look at, enemies to shoot, and objectives to pursue. But this is one of the few times so far that it's given you something more than that, a genuinely intriguing facility to push through that explains how this threat cultivates a few of its beasts of war. And you could say that Gears 2 did this quite a lot with the exploration of the Locust hives. But that wasn't giving you answers to something that you didn't already know. You already knew that they came from down here, you already knew that they were organized, that they were intelligent, that they had a queen. It's what made the Civil War or the undercover research facility stand out as more interesting because that information was not only new, it explained and answered questions that the player might have naturally had throughout their journey with the series. I know this is a lengthy detour from the objective of getting on a hot air balloon, but I think it's important to note when and why I have the most fun that I've had with this series, especially when its gameplay tends to look pretty close to identical regardless of setting. Either way, things settle back into your standard sort of distraction objectives after you finally hijack the balloon and head towards the former colonel. Yeah, finding Dad's important, but you know, Dizzy's got a big old supply of ammo that he just found and is pinned down by the locust. So yeah, we do that too. It's still fun, but obviously just a distraction. At least you get access to the one-shot long rifle, which, I mean, it one-shots any enemy. What do you expect? We don't exactly get to test it on anything beyond Reavers and the Royal Guard, but it is cool enough. Makes you wonder where it was up until this point, but that's kind of always the issue with designing a sequel's weaponry, isn't it? You head towards your destination, the Queen shows up and shoots you down with laser beams, and you crash land at the feet of Colonel Hoffman, whose eyesight is deteriorating fast as he once again considers killing Marcus before realizing that he is in fact not a locust. Your conversation with the guy on the way back to the fort is once again hilarious, though I'm still not sure if it's intentional or not.
Well, you must think it's pretty damn urgent. Hell, I'd almost given up on the damn thing.
Yeah, it contains information where Prescott's holding my father. Azura, ring any bells with you?
What in the hell do you mean, holding your father?
I got a message from him. He didn't get killed after all. Prescott had him kidnapped.
Dear God Almighty! And all that shit's on the disc?
Of course, it gets attacked afterwards by the pursuing locusts, and this level is interesting. So this entire chapter is a wave defense, and you can succeed quicker by defeating the waves of enemies if you're good enough. If not, you keep letting the horde further and further into the base until you drop a big tank of gas on them and light it up. I obviously was not good enough to stop them, but I did get close on one of the waves. It's kind of fun, and the whole feeling of it is all-out war, which makes sense given that this is one of the big game modes of Gears 3, and it's actually something that I played a lot of when the game came out. After this, you have to go rescue Anya and Sam, who have got caught up in the ruckus on their way over. Now, it's worth mentioning that while Anya and Marcus obviously have some kind of underlying romance going on, we've also been alerted to the fact that Sam likes Dom for some reason. Dude is written like a piece of plywood. Well, I mean a piece of plywood with a dead wife, so maybe there's bonus sympathy going on there. But for as shoehorned in as the potential romance feels, it does lend this rescue a bit of excitement and concern for the well-being of both of these women. And as the Lambent begin to unfortunately worm their way back into the fray, the game does cook up potentially the toughest threat that we've seen yet, the Lambent Berserker. This is the one cool Lambent that I've seen because it takes something that's been absent from the series since the first game and has it returning in an even more powerful form. Even the one-shot doesn't do anything against it, a testament to the thing's sheer defensive power. And even when Baird gets the Hammer of Dawn working again, which has apparently been on the fritz due to its connection to the satellites being tampered with after Jacinto's fall, that isn't even enough to kill this thing. Fortunately, it is powered by yellow, which means that it's weak to gun in the yellow spot. This means that the original fight that the first game brought with it has been repurposed so that you now have to shoot it as it charges at you, which makes this whole fight feel even more dangerous than when you were luring it into sunlight. Thank God it isn't powered by green instead, I don't even want to think about that. So now what? Well, let's just go through what the game presents here in this next doozy of a scene. So Hoffman hands Baird a disk that he was trying and failing to decrypt however long ago. Now that the chairman has given us the other disk, we can decrypt this disk, I guess. I don't know. Baird does his thing and reveals that the evil chairman had constructed an artificial hurricane that never moves and protects the existence of a top-secret island base, which is likely where Adam Phoenix is or was held. I guess people just thought it was a particularly long hurricane season. Throughout this whole last slew of interactions with Big Hoff, he went from being a loyal asshole to Chairman Prescott to a guy who now calls Prescott a power-hungry dickbag whenever he gets the opportunity. Hold your questions until the end. Now Baird goes, well shit, this is impenetrable unless we have some kind of submarine.
And Hoffman goes, "Oh, you mean like the old submarine that we just have lying next door?" After dropping that convenience bomb on us, I know what you're definitely thinking. But what about fuel for the submarine?
Yeah, if it's seaworthy, if you can get the motors running, and if you can fuel it.
Now, son, that's where I come in. I'm ex-merchant Navy.
Yeah, so this whole plot point is just, holy fuck, dude. This is some Call of Duty writing. This is basically, hey, we designed an underwater section, how do we get there? And for some reason, the writers thought that they would be cute and tried to make it sound logical by having Baird bring up the lack of fuel. But this only further exacerbates this whole issue when Yeehaw Dizzy Dimmadome steps in to reveal that he is in fact wearing a bandana, which means he was in the Navy, I guess. So yeah, we board some trucks for a fuel run down at the old fueling hole. God, I need Marcus to say something cool right now.
Okay, hit the metal! Go, go, go!
Yeah, Marcus, that's right. Hit the metal. Fuck yeah!
We're gonna crash if we don't make a gap soon.
Dude, if Sarens had discovered brakes, the Lambent days would have been numbered. Look, I don't know why I'm doing this now. I think it's because this is the first time this game has felt this gimmick-fueled, and I was really enjoying the gameplay in Act 2 only to jump headfirst into a sheer unadulterated early 2010s Activision-inspired nightmare. Fuck it. Say something cool, Marcus.
Ooh, now that's gotta hurt!
God damn it, Jace. So this whole thing is probably the first real distraction/filler content in the game, even though you're supposed to be getting fuel for the submarine. It's a weak enough premise as is, but it isn't as simple as playing through the vehicle section, loading up, and then playing through another one. Instead, you arrive at a ghost town that seems to be occupied by one crazy old man who's trying to blow the fuel pipeline sky high. Now, there is a fun reveal to all of this, but in the moment, the game feels more like it's coming up with distractions rather than marching towards some conclusions. Said fun reveal is that humans are now turning lambent also, which, yes, looks pretty cool, but they're also zombies. Fast, shambling, melee-oriented zombies. It's really not the developer's fault. This was at like the height of zombie-focused media. But man, this is one of those games where I wish they would have just ignored a trend. Thankfully, they don't do damage when they explode, so at least there's that. So obviously nobody makes any sort of connection here between the locusts and the humans. They simply dismiss this phenomenon as the lambency making a jump between species rather than bringing up the idea that humans might be more similar to locusts than they think. None of this new information is ever put together by the protagonists in order to come up with the truth. There's no chat about how the lab in Gears 2 might have been the staging grounds for experimentation on infected humans. There's no revelation about this rust lung disease that's been brought up a handful of times throughout these games as being the initial stages of lambency. There's no confirmation that perhaps this parasite is what led some humans to turn into locusts. Nobody is ever really curious in these games. Instead, we just get these zombies and everyone is like, wow, that's crazy. Hopefully we don't turn into that.
There's too many!
Marcus, they're everywhere! They just keep coming!
There's too many!
In a world where there are too many of them and not enough of us, one squad must activate yellow in order to fuel underwater boat. I will say that the writers remembered that Dom is a character at this point and have decided to focus a bit more on him by making this place his hometown. So we get a lot of small talk about whether he's okay to be here and all that, eventually peaking when he visits a family plot in a graveyard and apologizes to his wife for not being able to bring her body to the spot where they apparently buried their children. So yeah, that's fucking rough, but like, how did the writers fuck this up? Yes, we can dismiss the first game as being more of a goofy, experimental kind of thing. The series took off and they wanted to rectify that lack of emotional connection to the characters. Fine. But this is the first time that we've heard that Dom and Maria had kids who likely died in a locust attack. And this being thrown in at the last minute makes it feel like the kids weren't important enough for him to mention until now, detracting from the overall scene instead of adding to it. Like the whole thing feels like an afterthought. You had this picture where it was like, oh, here's me and my wife, and on the back she wrote that she loves me so much, but like, there were no kids in that picture. And it just felt like, well, wait, hold on, what if we made him have kids too? And they just thought of that between games. You had some strong ideas, but you never took the moments to have character building chats between these people. Some downtime where they talk about the past, where they came from, how they got here, all that shit. And it now feels like the third game is a crapshoot of moments where the writers are scrambling to make things touching. And the reality is that this has only worked well with Cole because his background as a pro athlete is naturally interesting in and of itself. There just needed to be a lot more fleshing out of these stories for them to properly hit the way that the writers were hoping that they would. So what do you do in this scenario in a series where you've created a fun to watch but not as fun to think about set of characters? Well, you pour all of your efforts into the same kind of fun to watch scenes. And in this case, the end of Act 3 is where Dom dies, making all of this sudden interest in his character feel almost abrasive. Like, obviously I remembered this moment because it was very well done for its time. But every time Dom suddenly started talking about his past and wife and kids and all that leading up to this moment, I was just thinking, oh, there's a death flag. But I have to say, it's still a good scene. It's convenient as all hell, as Dom happens to get cut off, run out of ammo, find a working vehicle next to an exposed fuel truck, and the resulting kamikaze explosion happens to kill every enemy while sparing the good guys. But it certainly is emotional. And I know this is gonna sound like a weird leap to make, but this is something that anime actually tends to excel at as a medium. I'm sure some of you just got whiplash at that remark, but hear me out. This might be a personal viewpoint, but I've often found that when I'm watching nearly any anime that has plots of convenience or loose logic that creates scenarios that the protagonists have to overcome, there's a heavy reliance on emotionally dense scenes to help carry an otherwise unfulfilling plot into being something more substantial. As in, you'll have a particularly hype moment complete with a sudden power-up, a sudden sacrifice, a sudden revelation that helps a character to unlock something more. And usually the soundtrack does a lot of heavy lifting to help complement this unlock. It has this quality that pulls on your heart and helps you to shut down your mind, and this scene sets out to do that same sort of thing. Dom says his final words makes it clear that he's going to sacrifice himself to save his friends, and then an instrumental version of Mad World plays as everything dies. And I feel like without that song, this scene isn't complete. Just like something like Goku's transformation into Ultra Instinct is a billion times better with that sharp instrumental stabbing that accompanies it. I've hardly ever felt nerdier than I did just now, but I'm also talking about video games for hours, so this should not be a shocker. The devs did do great with this scene, especially when they immediately turned the spotlight on Marcus, who was his best friend and the person that we care about the most in these games.
He's gone! There's nothing you can do! Stop
Get
it!
off me! God damn it! Let me get him out of there!
I know it seems obvious to make this death relate back to Marcus directly, but there was also this strange pseudo-relationship going on between Dom and Sam that they could have focused on too, and it would 100% have been the wrong move. So good on them for figuring that much out and working with what they had. When all is said and done, the reality of this entire conflict and sacrifice was for nothing, as Dizzy couldn't even siphon the fuel fast enough before the squad was overrun, making Dom's death worthless in the grand scheme of things and leaving Marcus with a bitter taste of defeat that he hasn't quite experienced in these games until now.
Okay. You can quit tiptoeing around me. He's dead. But he saved us. So we'll make sure he didn't die for nothing.
The quest for content continues as we roll up on one of the first towns that got nuked by the Hammer of Dawn and promptly run out of gas, which causes us the need to search for someone to trade with or something. This whole thing is such a flimsy premise at this point that it might actually be the weakest stretch of objectives in the series. Like, yes, the setting is cool. Seeing people encased in ash like Mount Vesuvius victims is some striking imagery. But we are now chasing another crazy man who is actively trying to Looney Tunes us to death with pianos, boxes of tickers, shopping carts, Rube Goldberg machines that spin assault rifles, explosive tanks, and so on. Now mind you, the city's name is literally Char, so we've now hit Kojima levels of naming conventions.
Though maybe we've always been there, let's be honest. And it just doesn't feel like the same game, you know? One could argue that the non-stop action formula of the previous games really didn't give the characters enough time to breathe, to rest, to chat, and I am inclined to agree with that. But this isn't on the same level as taking a break, this is walking through a city while constantly on edge with no room to talk. So you might as well ditch the slow level and go back to the non-stop action if this is the best that you can do. It just feels like a waste of time, and I don't fully understand why the devs went this route, especially when the chatter from these characters now borders on parody.
They've rigged the whole place with traps.
You fucking amateur! You think you can scare us off, huh? We're gears! Now you see that shit there? That ain't funny.
Follow that asshole!
Now where did that asshole go? Hey! Asshole!
I don't even know why Jace is still here and hasn't been killed off already. He is a waste of a character. Sam's not far behind him, but she at least had some chemistry with Baird when those two were at each other's throats. Of course, at this point, non-stop action only seems to be coming from one enemy source, the Lambent, which seemed to be drawn to Marcus and his squad like a magnet. So yeah, the alternative isn't very inspiring. Combine this yellow-powered combat with the shit-tier dialogue, and we've reached probably the lowest point in this trilogy so far.
All we want is fuel, and then we'll go. Is this Griffin willing to trade?
Well, lady, he might want to do business with you.
I feel like the writers honest to God got stun-locked on certain ideas and just kept repeating them. We go to meet with the boss of this establishment, a Vin Diesel-looking motherfucker who talks like Osmosis Jones.
So welcome to Griffin Tower, Cog. It was here before you destroyed Char and it's still standing now. And so am I.
We just need fuel, and then we'll go.
Bitch, you don't understand shit. Oh, and who the fuck are you?
Marcus Phoenix.
Bitch, you don't understand shit. Get my fuel and my cable car. Now can you manage that, killer?
You wouldn't be setting us up now, would you?
Bitch, you don't understand shit.
Shit, why you bringing them up here? Target practice for the chief.
I see trees of green.
Now before I completely lose my fucking mind, it is worth noting that this is actually a pretty decent scene after you get over the majority of what you're looking at. Like, this guy captures Dizzy, threatens to have him killed if Marcus isn't back with his fuel shipment within an hour, and then sends him on his way. Like, thematically, it's a fun plot line. It's one of those groups of survivors that Baird was fearing, you know? I still don't know why petrol is this hard to lock down. We've seen 5 million cubic liters of it across the franchise, but I guess it's gotta be refined. I don't know. I'll spare you the details on this one. It's just a mission where you fight lambent locusts and humans at various intervals while Jace says shit like this.
Yeah, let's not do that again. Ever!
You get the fuel, start to head back, the Queen's army shows up, and the gameplay is fun again. After rescuing Dizzy, the Tower Master continues to threaten and talk shit about the Cog and how much suffering they've caused, leading Marcus to respond with a tactical trauma dump.
It's always nothing but death, pain, and miseries, you piece of shit motherfuckers!
I just lost my fucking brother, alright? You hear that? My brother! You and your tower and all this fucking emulsion can go to hell!
This repels Tower Master temporarily, though not completely, as he has no context for who Marcus's brother is and likely does not give a shit as he has lost an entire population of people twice over now. But hey, at least the player feels good about Marcus letting off some steam. It's crazy because this entire plot was set up to showcase these people living in the husk of a city, farming oil for some reason, I guess to trade it to other stranded settlements, for generators or whatever else. You have a genuine asshole of a stranded leader who actually threatens us in a way that we have not been threatened. And then you just send in the Locust Horde and they all die. Like, what was the point of all of this?
Come on, let's get this fuel to the truck. We've got a submarine to find.
We've got a submarine to find? What the fuck is literally anyone else doing back at command? I thought that was their job. I mean, at least just do the whole 1 hour earlier thing and let me play as Cole again or something. What the fuck, man?
I swear this game has the highest highs and the lowest lows of the trilogy. Things have not been the same since Dizzy took his hat off. Thankfully, we are still fighting locusts here as the Queen is actively trying to stop us from reaching this hidden hurricane base. They throw out a big centipede enemy that joins the roster and requires you to shoot it in the ass until it dies, which kind of winds up being more annoying than fun when you don't have any human companions to shoot its ass while it chases you. It just feels like a co-op enemy, I guess. You get to the sub and Dizzy's like, well, it's gonna need a rotor and fuel. It needs fucking fuel. Did we not grab any from the actual refined fuel stockpile that we were just at? I mean, we had to have, because the whole reason that we stopped in Char was because our ride ran out of fuel. I feel like this entire plot is the result of the writers trying to reach beyond their ability, because there 100% should have been a point where they went, wait, so we send the player to a town to get fuel. Dom dies there, and they have to leave before they get it. Then they go to another town with a big stockpile of fuel, and the Queen attacks. Oh man, that's gonna be so cool. We'll have it charge in with the barges, the tower's gonna burn, it'll be great. Then they go to the submarine, and it's old, so it needs parts. But we also designed another branching path here, so what else would a submarine need? Oh, fuel! Wait a minute. The retrieval of the rotor is standard stuff that's capped off with a section where the loader makes a reappearance, pointing towards why this was an objective in the first place. Why design loader if loader no show up? You bring it back and then head for fuel for the third time while Cole and Baird sit back at base and crank their hogs or whatever the fuck they're up to. You grab the fuel, load it up, and encounter the elite Cantus guards who are wearing armor that deflects bullets. You're told to use explosives, but I was already doing that, so I didn't really notice a difficulty spike here. When you're finally done, you jump straight into the ocean with this thing, leading into the final chapter of the act, a prolonged first-person turret section. I personally don't really care for this kind of thing, but in a way I kind of respect the experimentation with the mechanics, even if being in first person isn't a crazy leap to make for something like this. You can tell that this level was definitely designed mechanically first, with emphasis on story later. It was probably thrown out as one of the big moments immediately when they were storyboarding, and then they kind of built everything else around it. So you kill some strange creatures, encounter a leviathan, shoot down mines and torpedo defenses, all that. The implication is obvious in that all of this was set up this way to protect the darkest secrets that Chairman Prescott had tucked away in whatever facility that we're coming up on. I'm actually a little surprised that lambent stalks didn't rise up and create aquatic enemies, especially when they had no issue operating from the water before. Finally making it into this facility has you discovering that the humans here are all dead, as you might have expected. Instead, the remnants of the Queen's locusts have set up shop in this place that was supposed to be a sort of utopia for the most important scientists of humanity, a research base protected from the locust threat, which would explain why there's all this secrecy surrounding it. Fighting further in has Adam Phoenix calling out to you over the comms, finally connecting the puzzle pieces that we've had for a long time. He was here working on a way to stop first the locusts and then the lambent. The Queen figured this out, somehow got around the island's defenses without destroying them, and then commandeered Adam's research and forced him to figure out how to kill the lambent without killing the locusts. Remember how I casually tossed out that the fuel that Sarah's been using is parasitic? Yeah, that was supposed to be the big reveal here, but I ruined that when I went over the first game because, let's be honest, it's hard to explain that the wretches got turbocharged by ingesting ordinary gasoline. And I'm not sure which came first when it came to guiding the series in this lambent direction. Did the devs toss out the whole lambent idea as a fun little way to create explosive enemies and then later on go, oh, what if we did that to other types of locusts? Or was this always the plan from the beginning? And this is a general problem with Gears of War. It does feel like some ideas were set up to be expanded on in later entries. Dom's wife, Marcus's dad, Cole's career, all that shit. But those were never the main focus of Gears. They were the sideshow to the main event, the Locusts. And they quickly got overtaken by the Lambent by the end of the second game, creating this scenario where we either work with them to take out the bigger threat, or we try to kill them all. And that's not a bad situation to introduce as a backdrop to your story, right?
Hell, there's even scenarios where the player can choose which kind of ending they want to go for. But it was never actually approached that way. Instead, it feels like the main story pieces of these games were rattled off the cuff by the writers in a haphazard slew of ideas that they made up as they went along. So instead of exploring the nuances that naturally arise due to this direction, the writers decided to just hammer away at this path of least resistance. Truly the strength build of writing that looks at all of this potential and then just chooses the big two-handed hammer as the writing tool. The reality is that there could have been a story where the Locust Queen's forces are devastated, and in desperation she contacts Marcus and proposes a temporary truce to take out the Lambent threat once and for all. And you could still have these wild, savage locusts roaming about on the surface. They're the best part about the game and could have easily had some kind of chieftain who's leading a rebellion against the Queen's poor leadership. In the savage locust's eyes, she led them to their current plight and should be overthrown. And that would create an even deeper stint of writing that wholly separates the locusts as an emotional people that are capable of deeper reasoning instead of mindless ants that just follow their queen. For as much as I've put forth the idea that the Lambent are more of a hive mind that thoughtlessly obey their programming, the Locust Horde isn't much different in this regard, despite seemingly having levels and tiers of priesthood, royal guard, and so on. Regardless, this is what we got out of this series, and it's still fun to play, which is the most important part. But it's a real shame that despite having so many solid building blocks, the writers decided to take them and build a shallow, unimpressive bunker instead of a pristine castle. So from here, Adam claims that the Lambent is about to evolve into its final form, which will wipe out all other life. He's developed a weapon to destroy it once and for all, but it will also destroy the Locust Horde, which the Queen wants to obviously prevent. So instead of deploying it, he's been stuck here, forced to update the weapon to spare the Locusts while still killing the Lambent off. The gameplay here is fun as always, though hopping into a silverback trivializes much of the stage, as it's more of a fun ride with minimal effort than a challenge despite the onslaught of high-end locusts. Throughout the journey, your squad makes little quips about how the government hid this facility from humanity and what assholes they are for doing it, which further showcases the ever-abundant ineptitude on behalf of the devs. Because I mean, of course the government is going to hide secrets from the rabble. That's what they do. You can feel slighted all you want, but you've also been part of a faction that forcibly conscripts its people into the military and/or breeding farms. You either volunteered for this shit where information is on a need-to-know basis and you're just a grunt serving the military, or you were forced into this position. And these people definitely weren't forced into this position. At least, not given how they've acted so far. So why are they upset about it now? Chairman Prescott was not a good man, but if you were willing to serve him when he began issuing space laser strikes on millions and are now mad that he created a top-secret facility where the world's more brilliant minds worked on weapons to defeat their enemies, then I mean, what did you expect? Of course, this direct reaction from the squad is only further complemented by more unexplained conveniences that result in this area of the world being littered by locusts. It's never explained how they discovered this facility, where they came from, how they got past the maelstrom surrounding the island. If they dug up from the bottom, then they would have hit ocean. Did they then devise suits to breathe underwater and take out the turret systems before re-enabling them? It's something that should have been addressed but never is, because it's another level that was designed for gameplay first and story second, despite it being so close to the end of the trilogy and containing so many major sources of answers. The crew decides to shut down the artificial hurricane once and for all, which of course results in an explosion because those are always cool. The weather returns to normal and in come Cole and Baird, who are riding in on Navy vessels. I guess that's what they were doing the entire time. Now mind you, these aren't random COG Navy ships, they're actually a former enemy of the COG and a part of the UIR, or the Union of Independent Republics. None of this shit is explained, it's just laid out there for those who have read any books that released outside of these games. And I find that really disappointing. Sure, it's cool for somebody who's been keeping up with the universe's lore on all fronts, but it's included like an Easter egg rather than a main point. And had this game either been a little longer or diverted from all of the sideshow with the quest for fuel, then I think we could have had a good chunk of the game where we play as Cole and Baird and learn about the UIR in real time as we approach them for aid. Like the majority of this is going over the average player's head.
In fact, I remember thinking, wait, these guys found the Navy? Is it just because the cog fell apart and no one knew where it went, or what? There just could have been so much more fulfillment from this game's story. Of course, the question of Dom's whereabouts comes up immediately and the two react accordingly, which is fine and all, but there's this weird background story that I really only know about because of the third game's collector's edition, which heavily implies that Dom and Marcus grew up together, that the Phoenix and Santiago families were very close to one another. So close, in fact, that Adam bequeathed his fortune to the Santiago family in the event that his son died before he died. And yet, when Marcus tells Adam that Dom is dead, he's basically like, wow, that sucks, but you're gonna have to get over that one, son. So seeing these guys react with anger and disbelief really only draws your attention more to Adam's reaction, which was pretty tame all things considered. After clearing out the LZ for the UIR choppers, the crew heads to the upper floors of the tower at the center of the island. And something happens that I've asked for since the first game. A scene plays out where these guys talk to each other while they ride the elevator. Basically, Adam's invention is a bit like an EMP that kills off all traces of lambent cells without harming humans. The chat here has Anya explaining to Baird that everyone has some trace of this parasite within them, and that the weapon should take care of that, which is something that we've already discovered in a small chat earlier in the mission. So while this discussion is very welcome, it still misses the point of being an intermittent talk between these guys in a moment of downtime. Dom's death isn't discussed. Cole and Baird don't talk about what they did during Marcus's mission. I love the inclusion of the idea, but the execution is lacking as always. The setting of this area is very cool and wholly different from the rough and gritty landscapes that we've fought through for 3 games now. Because it's seemingly a multi-billion or even trillion-dollar facility, the place is posh and filled with architecture that would rival the fanciest hotels. What's really interesting to me though is that with a constant maelstrom surrounding the island for God knows how long, this place likely got hammered with rain day after day after day. And this might just be a coincidence, but that would age any sort of copper exteriors pretty quickly into something more green, which is what all of the rooftops and statues are colored. It's hard to give the devs credit like that, but if they purposefully oxidize the features here, that is a pretty fun detail. There is one last surprise that the writers have yet to fully unveil, though it has been hinted at repeatedly in vague ways up to this point. Now it's starting to be spelled out as Queen Mira ambushes the squad once again while they ascend to the top of this spire. In her rage, she states that Adam has been given 20 years to solve this issue of lambency, 5 more years than when the Locust Horde initially attacked humanity. Which of course means that Adam was in contact with and was working for the Queen before any of this ever happened. This is such a big point in the story that Baird actually brings it up immediately instead of just ignoring it until more information is revealed, which is something foreign to this game's dialogue writing. After crushing the Queen beneath a gigantic counterweight at the top of this thing, Marcus reports her apparent death to his dad, who has more of a reaction to this death than he did with Dom. Of course, Marcus being Marcus, he seems to wave this behavior away, telling Adam not to waste his sympathies on this monster instead of, questioning why his dad is reacting this way. Because why write a character that has any sort of natural curiosity or internal thought processes when you can just write a tough guy soldier who has emotional outbursts sometimes but is overall just a lunk of a human? If I were to give the writers the undeserved benefit of the doubt, this could have just been a soft spot in Marcus due to how he feels about his dad. And that does kind of seem to be the case. Because even when we get to Adam, Marcus seems to be more in disbelief that his dad is actually alive and in front of him, and less concerned about what he's yammering on about. Baird, on the other hand, is asking and has been asking the more critical questions. So it could really just be an intentional weak spot in Marcus's psyche, but it's hard to overlook with all of the other shortcomings in these games. Accentuating this point is the reunion, which has to be one of the least satisfying reunions in a game. Despite not seeming to ever have his father and son moment as a goal in the first game, the player has likely wondered about Adam Phoenix since being in his estate, and it became more of a goal to work towards in the second game onward. This reunion is 3 games in the making, and yet Marcus hardly ever says anything of substance while his dad goes on and on about the locusts and the lambent. Also, they don't hug or anything like that because men hugging is gay. I don't know. The plot-relevant info that we get here has Adam claiming that he and he alone knew about the locusts before they ever made their appearance on the surface, and that he's been working to solve their lambency issue so that they remain underground, but was too slow to cook up anything that would satisfy Mira. So she invaded the surface when she was backed into a corner, and the scientist has regretted his lack of haste for a large chunk of his life after things went the way that they did. As we go to escape with Adam, we still have a couple of dwindling but major questions. 1. Are the locusts in fact humans? And 2. Who is Queen Mira and why does she look so close to human? Neither of these questions are answered. The final confrontation occurs on the roof of this building where Adam begins plugging in his EMP cure into the computer and revving it up while Mira springs up for one final attack. As a boss fight, this is fine, definitely easier than ROM in the first game because you don't just get insta-gibbed and have a chance to get picked up by allies. I would have definitely died on a higher difficulty. But you basically just shoot the mouth, and then when the beetle finally lands, Adam goes from, "Oh shit, Marcus, I wish you didn't have to kill the queen," to, "Here, son, take the most devastating weapon I've ever created and shoot this bitch." So yeah, nuance is an enigma to these writers. Imagine writing somebody flawed that nearly fumbles everything at the end to create a dramatic moment. That would be too much to ask. Anyways, let me try to explain this ending in a way that adequately conveys why this might be one of the worst conclusions I've ever witnessed in a game. So the Queen's beetle dies, and then Adam's EMP begins to go off. This is when Adam goes, "Hey, so I didn't have anyone to experiment on with the whole lambent destroying tonic, so I injected myself with lambency constantly and now the EMP will kill me." You're telling me that when conversing with the Queen repeatedly throughout the years, you never thought to say something like, "Hey, I can create a cure, but I'm gonna need some test subjects from the locusts to run experiments on"? Like, you had an army of drones at your disposal for this. You probably had other humans at one point too if you simply explained to Prescott that you were devising a kill tonic for lambency. If you die prematurely because you injected a little too much yellow into your veins, the last chance for humanity perishes with you. You're a fucking scientist. And this is the problem with the writers scripting a genius-level character. He's only ever going to be as smart as the writers are. So instead of making this make any remote amount of sense, you go for the plot twist and watch as this goofus just fucking evaporates into dust because... Okay, I mean, I did audibly react when he turned into ash. I mean, come on, that's fucking nuts. But that sharp reaction was replaced with laughter 5 seconds later when this dialogue comes spewing out of Marcus.
Dad, no. He's gone. He's gone. He's gone.
What terrible fucking dialogue, Jesus Christ. Queen Mira gets up from the remains of her beetle to saunter over and laugh at Marcus's dad dying in front of his eyes, and then Marcus stabs her to death. Why would she do that? Why wouldn't she flee or attack? Why wouldn't these guys capture her for questioning? Because stabbing her is the more emotional thing to write.
Fuck yeah, we got that bitch, let's go.
Stupid ass plot. So the EMP goes out. Oh right, before all this, Carmine came flying in on a chopper and presumably dies when it's shot down. But the end scene reveals that he's still alive, the coolest Carmine making it to the end of a game at last. Here's the problem. He was involved in one act of Gears 3 and has not been seen since. We actually saw more of the second Carmine. Instead, we got dipshit Jace, who consistently added nothing of value to the game whatsoever. As always, the devs seem to have great ideas, insert them into the game, and then completely whiff because they get distracted with another idea. If Carmine had been with us throughout the entirety of Gears 3 and we had gotten some heartfelt scenes with him, then him surviving this ordeal would have been a truly uplifting moment of triumph. Instead, it almost seems like a humorous moment. Haha, that guy lived this time instead of dying like usual.
This plot is so scatterbrained and ill thought out that it honestly felt like they found a way to siphon pure ADHD into a story, bouncing through whatever level ideas that they had while not bothering to look at the bigger picture. The ending sequence has humanity celebrating while the locusts and Lambent implode or explode on the spot, a definitive ending to their species depicted in a sweeping set of scenes. Marcus now has immense depression, having lost his best friend and dad back to back, both perishing right in front of his eyes. And I would say that this is probably the one good thing that the writers managed to pull off here, because somebody like that should be able to rest and reflect on the sacrifices that made all of this possible. But I also think that it says a lot that your final big picture moment is Marcus removing his bandana, almost a Master Chief helmet removing moment. And it feels like that's what the devs were trying to emulate here. And here's the issue with that sentiment. The reason that seeing Master Chief take off his helmet is such an iconic ending to something is because of what the Master Chief is. And while your first instinct is to say that he's a human, it's hard to argue with him being something more, an enigma of alien destruction, a weapon, a faceless, battle-hardened weapon of humanity. Marcus has been set up to be more human in every way since the first game. He has a face, he has strong emotions, he cares for other humans in a way that seems beyond somebody like Bungie's Master Chief. But at the same time, he's unquestioning, unflinching, and a machine in his own way. He follows orders, he gets the job done, he hardly ever questions what he's seeing. Marcus Phoenix is an amalgamation of a human soldier with feelings and a relentless killing machine who will always heroically get the job done. But he takes the worst parts of those character traits and runs with them. He's emotional, but he doesn't show love to Anya beyond concern for her well-being at the end of one game. He cares for his dad, but he won't even hug him or show any sort of happiness towards him. He'll discover some kind of horrific secret of humanity, but then won't question it further despite constantly firing off little remarks about it throughout the level. Instead of being somebody capable but curious, compliant but emotionally outspoken, strong-willed but also opinionated, Marcus is squarely in the middle of two character arcs, exhibiting the weakest parts of each side. So this ending where he takes his bandana off isn't anywhere near as striking as the developers thought it was. And even his final words of the trilogy aren't profound as much as they are melodramatic for the sake of melodrama.
What's left, Anya? What have we got left now?
Story-wise, Gears 3 is an abomination, as if somebody took a story with strong potential and injected it with lambency, causing it to twist and fester in the worst ways while still vaguely resembling what it set out to emulate. There are so many parts where things went completely wrong that it's actually kind of impressive. Dom is depicted as a husk of a survivor who's doing his best to cope with his wife's death, but then is completely ignored as a character until it's time for him to die. Jace is inserted as a new squad member but has zero redeeming qualities, a filler squad mate who doesn't die. Meanwhile, a new Carmine is brought into the fold, one that is flagged to live through this ordeal for once, and instead of guiding him to become closer with the player, he's completely forgotten about until the end of the game, making his non-death almost seem like a joke. Sam is inserted as a potential love interest for Dom, but never has any scenes where she capitalizes on that or makes a move whatsoever beyond other people mentioning that she loves him. The Stranded of Char are shown to have survived despite everything that they've been through, but then wind up dying anyway, making their inclusion seem almost silly. The Locust Horde has been dispersed to a point where the next logical step would be to explore their origins, their structure, their queen, their motivations, anything along those lines. But they're instead just another bad guy to shoot, with their queen simply being an asshole. She didn't seem to have any other sort of motivation besides, I want to get my people to the surface and then we're gonna rule the planet. I don't know. Like, you had a lot of setup, but no reward whatsoever. All of the questions raised in the second game revolving around the sires and their origins, the fact that they have a priesthood, the fact that they have a language system, the fact that they prayed to a giant worm that we killed, the fact that they were taking prisoners to break them for seemingly no reason, all of that was for nothing. Like the writers just had no interest in these topics after they brought them up. They never even attempted to explore these ideas, they just shotgunned them out there and went, alright, next idea, let's go. Marcus is set up to have huge, sweeping, emotional moments, but it feels like the writers were too afraid to display them. But the worst oversight in this game's story is Adam Phoenix. They had every chance to make Adam Phoenix into arguably one of the best game characters to come out of the Xbox 360 era. He was a scientist who forsook his family for his work, who invented a weapon of mass destruction so powerful that it annihilated cities on the same level as the atomic bomb or worse. It was something that he always regretted, but his misery didn't end there as he somehow came into contact with the Locusts before any other human did. Which is nearly impossible given that scientists usually work in teams, but maybe he fell into a fucking Undertale hole? I don't know. Ignoring the stupidity of this setup though, his contact with the Queen had her negotiating with him for a cure to their problem, and he wasn't fast enough to work it out. So he felt crushing responsibility for the E-Day attacks on top of the already crushing guilt for the Hammer of Dawn strikes. And yet he persisted, working in secret on a cure for lambency in the hopes that it will make this nightmare go away. He's then kidnapped by Prescott and forced to go back to work for the COG before all of the humans around him are killed in a hostile takeover by the Queen. Once again, the cure is all he can focus on, despite knowing that his son is still out there fighting a war that he feels like he created. The potential for a fantastic story is here, but the parts that the writing team focused on are all surface level, a shallow portrayal of an otherwise good character. The devs just could not for the life of them figure out how to make them fit in a way that meant something, instead just opting for the dramatic no matter how little sense that it made. So let's take it from the top. The original Gears of War trilogy is a heavily flawed but still fun series to play. I would say that the gameplay is as good as I remember, but that the story was put out at a time when I was ill-equipped to analyze games the way that I do now. So yeah, the story was nowhere near as good as I remember. The cover shooter aspects were done fantastically and only improved with each game. The first Gears in particular had the most amount of flaws, but was overall a good prototype for its time, creating a fun to look at and play game that executed its mechanics well and accomplished what it set out to do. The second game only perfected that further and easily had the most consistently good moments that were accented with fun gimmicks and great level design. The third game further refined and added to the gameplay, mostly implementing fun objectives and ideas like the individual weapon executions with great success. That said, fighting Lambent decidedly weighed the game down with enemies that weren't fun to fight and caused a fair chunk of Gears 3's combat to blunder and become stale. It's at least made up for by the Savage Locusts, but is still a stain on the combat overall. Story-wise, the first game has all of the setup in the world with no payoff. It's convenient, it's bulky, it never seems to take itself seriously. The second game does a fantastic job at resetting the scope of humanity and the Locust Horde, causing you to fully realize what's at stake and where the two combatants stand in terms of strength. It answers more questions than it asks, but it still keeps a lot of secrets to itself, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing when you're setting up a sequel. While some emotional moments are forced into the game without enough supporting scenes, it's still easily the best of the bunch in terms of story, and is well-rounded even with its accompanying flaws. Gears 3 on the other hand fails at every step, tripping over itself in a race to create more action, more suspense, and more drama. It decidedly feels like a game that was designed in its initial stages by looking at what cool gimmicks could be included first and foremost, and then remembered that it had a story. But it didn't remember that this story is supposed to wrap up here, and it's supposed to have many answers to it. Instead, it takes the time to focus on one or two big questions and then forgets about answering the rest. It isn't terrible in the way that something like the Veilguard is, where the hope of a good story was snuffed out immediately. It's instead terrible in that the sheer potential that it had was completely lost despite giving you the hope that it wouldn't be. And for as much as I wish that it would be the entry to break through this identity of being a gamer bro, testosterone-fueled action game, it literally plays into that every chance that it gets, even including a metal-adjacent song crafted for this game in the credits.
Gears of
I don't know much about the later entries in this series. I've heard in passing that Gears 5 in particular was bad or went woke or whatever the fuck stupid ass buzzword that reviewers use to describe a game they don't like. But I don't know if things got better or worse than they already were at the conclusion of Gears 3. I also have no idea if people would even care to watch a review on those games, so I don't know, maybe one day I'll get to those stories. Regardless, the original trilogy will live on in my mind as a solid action game with a story that failed its ultimate objective. Thanks for watching. Like I said, I didn't expect for this video to progress beyond the first game, but I think that would have been an ultimately unsatisfying video to watch. So hopefully this one turned out semi-satisfying. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring the video. If you want to check out the game, use my link in the pinned comment or video description for a load of bonuses if you're a new player or are returning after 6 months. Not sure what I'll hit next, but it will involve a video game. Until then though, I have merch over at my merch shop. Shirts and cups, hoods and sticks, buy something that's extra thick. I'm not a poet. I have a Twitch where I press buttons as hard as I can in an attempt to break my controller. That usually happens most Tuesdays and Fridays. I have a Twitter where I post my new videos. I have a Discord where people hang out in the meantime. And I have a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.